Recording in progress.
Thank you. So pleasant to hear.
I stay put.
He sounds better in yes. Oh, sorry. We ready?
But it wants to say no.
Are we on?
Out that way.
Okay. So we'll call the meeting to order and we'll do the pledge of allegiance first. Don't mind. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all.
Yes, thank you, Chair Felice. Montecito Planning Commission hearings are televised live on County Santa Barbara Television, CSB TV Channel 20 at 9 a.m. in the South Coast, Lompoc, San Ynez Valley, San Maria, and Orca areas. Rebroadcast Montecito Planning Commission hearings are on Fridays after 5 p.m. on CSB TV Channel 20. Today's hearing will also be streamed live on the county's website and will be available to download in a day or two. We're going to move on to roll call.
Yes, Mr. Villalobos, I should keep it formal.
Commissioner Senauer.
Here.
Mr. Saul.
Here.
And Chair Felice. Here. And for the record, Commissioners Miller and Kupiec are absent today.
Yes, unfortunately, COVID's hit the ranks. So should we have a projection report? Or shall we, pardon the status report?
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Commissioners. In regards to the status of our agenda today, there's just, this doesn't show very often, but there are two items on the waive public hearing section. No actions required, noticing purposes. So that's just a notification that no actions needed. Looking at the consent agenda item, there's one item on consent, which is the annual maintenance report for the debris flow or the debris nets. And then on the standard agenda, we have a condition of compliance report on the Miramar Hotel parking. And then we have a track map. And then our last item is from Long Range Planning Division, which is an ordinance amendment package. And staff is ready to present on all those items today. I can move the projection report, Mr. Chair.
Yes, go ahead.
So our next scheduled meeting will be on October 18th. And as of right now, unless Mr. Villalobos says differently, I believe we'll be back here. This room? On October 18th. Yes. So on October 18th, we'll remain in this room. We're anticipating in November to be back in the hearing room in Santa Barbara, usual location. Going back to the October hearing, there are 3 items scheduled for that date. There's 2 lot line adjustments and then a development plan on that agenda. And then on November 8th, we have, nope, that's the wrong planning commission. November 15th. We're tentatively scheduling to have the development plan revision for the debris flow nets to come to the commission with the request for an extension of time on that. So that's in November. We're almost at the end of the year. December 20th is our last hearing of the year. We don't have anything targeted for that date, but it's still a few months away, so we may. That concludes the projection report, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. So any issues that are not part of this discussion today that the public has comment on, this would be the time. Is that right, Mr. Villalobos?
And I have not received any speaker slips and I do not see any hands raised on Zoom.
Okay. So we'll move on to Planning Commissioner's informational reports. Dan?
Which of these?
This
is not the report.
No,
Yeah.
this is reports of any thoughtful information you might have gleaned over the last month. No? Are you talking to me now?
That was it. That was
Okay.
the committee class.
Well, any comment? I guess we'll move off of this subject and this item or this number. Then we have the minutes of June 21st to be considered. So we haven't. Copy of it. Yes, if we have comments, we'll start up here. Mr. Sens, is that all right?
Yeah, David, I recused from the Heart So Big, and I'm not sure if that was indicated.
Okay.
It had those who moved in second and the absent but not recorded that I recused.
Got it.
And thank you. And I think other than that, that's the only modification I would have. Thank you.
All right. Do you have any comments on that?
No.
Yeah, I reviewed it this morning, didn't bring my copy, but I saw nothing on there. So I would take a motion, if we could have one.
I so move to accept the minutes of June 21, 2023 of MPC with the modification of recusal on Heart So Big agenda item. Thank you.
Okay. Any other? Guess not. So you take a vote on that, or do we?
I think we need a second first.
Oh,
Oh,
I'll
sorry,
second.
I can't do that. All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
I guess we got it done. It's a new way in this new building. All right, so we don't think we have our director, so are you gonna handle this?
She's online.
Yeah, Mr. Chair,
Oh.
the Director Palmer will be on.
Okay,
I am here.
hello,
Hi. Are you ready for me?
sure,
Oh, I hear some echo. but-
can you hear us?
Yeah, I can. There is definitely feedback. Do you hear that feedback?
No.
No, you're good.
Okay, great. Good morning, Mr. Chair. Ah, now I can see the commission. Okay. We had a bad camera angle there for a bit. So let me get your notes up here. So just a couple of reminders this morning. There is a Planning Commissioners Association annual conference in Tuolumne County this year. And that is in October on the 6th and 7th. And so that's available to the commissioners if they're interested in going. They have trainings, and I think it's probably an interesting event. The county does not have funding for travel for something like that, but you're certainly welcome to attend. Also, there's the APA conference, which does have some sessions specifically for planning commissioners. And that is scheduled for September 18th and 20th. So that's next week, if you're interested in that. Signups are have happened some time ago, but you might still be able to get in. And then there were a few items that the board had acted on recently. One is the Coastal Resource Enhancement, Mitigation Fund, that's CREF. And the board took action on that on 8/29. So that is the program where we take money from the oil and gas industry that they pay into a fund, and we distribute that among nonprofits that have come through an application process. And there's many good projects that come through. There was some funding that went to the Land Trust for an acquisition along the Gaviota coast. We have these trackers, which are wheelchairs that help handicapped individuals access the beach. Some money went to the wildlife network. And there are several others, but it's always a good effort, and it's exciting to see the projects that get funded through that process. There was also an appeal of the valve Pacific Pipeline. And that is, the board did not take action on that. We had one board member in District 3, Supervisor Hartman, recuse herself. And it was a 2-2 vote on adding valves to the pipeline. And so that's a no action. In terms of future board items, we have the appeal of the Strauss Wind Energy Project on October 3rd. We have an appeal of the change of ownership of the Las Flores pipeline, same pipeline from Plain All-American to Exxon, and that is going to be heard on September 19th. We have the Garrity Garage appeal, which is in Isla Vista, and that's going to be on the 17th of October. And we also have an appeal of North Fork Frost Ponds, which is up in the Cuyama Valley. That's on the 10th of October. And last but not least, the item that you're hearing today from Long Range Planning is going to be heard by the board on November 28th. And I'm happy to answer any questions. Oh, and one other thing I need to be advised the commission of is that the housing element revisions that were based on the comments made by the state has been posted on our website for a 7-day public review period. That was posted last night. So the public has 7 days to take a look at it. And then we will be submitting that to the state on September 22nd. We have been working very hard with the state over the last few months, 2 months roughly, to make sure that our responses satisfy them. And we're hoping that we can get a state that we are in a position to be able to move towards hearings on the housing element, which is would be very exciting. We're hoping to get that up to the Planning Commission in November, and then they'll make a recommendation to the board. The reasons that are associated with the housing element will not travel with the actual housing element itself. They happen subsequent to the housing element adoption. So the housing element really is about reporting on data in our community and the policies and programs that we are adopting to help resolve the housing crisis. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Director Plowman. Regarding your last indicator about rezoning, is it separate from the housing? What is the timeline for that? Thank you.
Well, we're still working towards the deadline, which is in February. But we need to get the housing element portion adopted first. And since I don't know when the state's response is coming, it's hard for me to predict. So as soon as I have more information, I'll make sure I share that with the commission.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Okay. Well, we're kind of new to this room, so we're scared to talk to you.
I see myself in like 4 different screens.
Yeah. Bisected twice, whatever.
Right.
Okay. Well, thank you for your report and
Sure.
enjoy. Are you downtown? Are you in your office?
I am.
Oh, lucky you. Okay. Thank you.
All right. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Okay. So we are now at the phase of our meeting where we have the 2, these are consent.
No, so those are just notification purposes, so we can move to the consent.
Okay. All
item.
right. So it's Montecito debris flow mitigation. You have a report from.
So, Mr. Chair, it is on the consent agenda. If the commission wants to discuss and ask questions, we need to move it off the consent agenda and have Mr. Villalobos read it in the record.
Well, since we have some of the main contributors to this program. I guess I would ask them if they wanted to say anything.
We can pull it off. If any of the commissioners want to ask questions, or if you want to ask the applicant or representative, then we can pull it off the agenda.
Let's pull it off. Okay.
Okay.
So
So we'll have Mr. Villalobos read it in the record. Staff is here to give a presentation. So they're here to
Sorry.
answer questions, and then I see the representatives here as well.
Yeah. I know they're coming back down the road a piece to discuss permit applications and things of that nature, but this is only filing for 2022. But I thought if there's anything that they might want information for us, so maybe help prepare us, if nothing else, what's coming. Hi,
There
Pat.
you go.
Morning.
Morning.
So we're, put the mic close to you there.
We need to
He
read
has
it in the
to-
record first.
We need to read it first, sorry. That's why I was cheating.
All right. The Montecito Planning Commission will receive and file the annual maintenance report as required by condition number 31 of the approved Montecito debris flow mitigation project development plan, project case number 19 DVP 36.
Okay,
So, Mr. Chair,
yes.
briefly, so now that it's pulled off, I'm John Zorovich, the manager of the Energy Minerals Compliance Division. With me today is the permit compliance planner, Eric Graham, and supervising planner, Aaron Briggs. So staff has prepared a memo for the 2022 annual report. So we're here to, available for questions if you have any for us.
You're just to file your report.
We're here to file, today, we're here to file the annual report for the
Okay.
bases and nets. Also, as you've asked, is the applicant here, if you have questions about it for them. We're here really to focus on the monitoring report. So
Yes.
if you have anything that might be related to a future application, you may wanna
Well,
hold off on that till the
the
application.
only reason why I would want to lightly touch on the future is the fact that a lot of people have been asking what's going on this last summer. And since we're only talking about 22, it's, a year and a half ago. I thought we might get a little bit, since we're in the, the digital age, we might hear just a little bit of what's going on. So since they're here, maybe we'll give them a few minutes to tell us where they're at, if you don't mind.
No, that's fine. I just wanted to kind of still start putting a framework.
Yes, I understand. I totally agree with that. Well, that's our mission today, is to file that thing. But anyway,
Well, we're here respectfully to respond to any questions you might have had about a filing of our annual report. We didn't know if there were questions that were raised there. I'm assuming that you've seen it.
yes.
Okay, and I just wanted to see if there's any clarification you wanted about the stuff in the annual report. We're gonna be back at another point to talk about the future, but I don't want to take up the commission's time
Okay.
unless you have specific things that you want to know about that today.
Well-
But we're here for whatever you want from us.
I guess I'm just curious on what has progressed in the last 8 months, even though it's not officially gonna be filed now. Can you help the community understand where we are with the efforts that you've put forth?
Yeah, well, what we've been trying to do, and it's required by our permit, is proceed with the clean out of the upper net in San Ysidro Canyon.
Mhm.
And so we've been on a road for that since January. I was reviewing some stuff this morning, correspondence from February with Montecito Fire, Los Padres National Forest, and also the permitting process through the regulatory agencies, which we're just now completing. We had a meeting yesterday. It's scheduled out, the clean out. So we've got the schedule now for our start date. And it's gonna be about a 2.5 week process, starting the week of September 25th, when we're gonna do the pre-construction surveys.
Okay,
And then on the following week, access limited construction, we'll start moving into with a helicopter to bring in heavy equipment and then start the clean out process which we detailed as part of our original
right.
permit.
So there's not much of a footprint on what you're gonna be doing as far as messing up the sort of indigenous little.
I would defer to Jessica on that right there. She's
Just in a couple of minutes, just tell us just the not abbreviated, but sensitive way you plan on doing this work. Because the neighbors and the people I know have been sort of anticipating this happening this last summer, and it hasn't happened yet. And so I'm glad to hear that it's coming up soon. but just to refresh our memory, can you explain to us in maybe in a paragraph or two the most, because I know everybody wants to move on, but how you plan on cleaning this place up as neatly as possible?
Mr. Chair and Commissioners,
Thank you.
we do have a work plan that's been provided to the county staff, and what will happen is we'll first install a cofferdam and a creek diversion, so we'll move the water around the work area. And then and that's to prevent excessive sedimentation downstream. It's also what the agencies wanted, Army Corps, Regional Board, and CDFW. So first we'll divert the creek out of the way, and then what they'll do is they'll start, there's a couple zones upstream of the net and two downstream of the net where they will redistribute the debris and reestablish the native channel. And so it'll cast to the sides, and then there's been some failure in some of the trails, so some of that will probably be rebuilt with some of this material. And then once the channel's reestablished, then that material will be stabilized with, appropriate erosion control and whatnot. So they're hoping to take just 3 weeks max, 3 work weeks to finish the
Is any
distribution.
closures for the public to know about that's gonna happen?
The trail is already closed and has,
Yeah.
but people have been using it. So we will be there to, deter people, especially when the helicopter is flying, to keep people off the trail. The helicopter is going to be coming from up above, from East Camino Cielo. So we'll encounter less traffic than if we were flying from below. But yeah, we'll have monitors on site, not specifically for hikers, but we'll be able to kind of back them off if there's a helicopter coming.
Like last time, we were working with Montecito Trails Foundation and coordinating with them. So any day that we had helicopters flying, especially in 2019, we had monitors on the lower part of the trail and above the trail to stop hikers when the helicopter was in the air and pull them up and explain to them what was going on. And then we would let them pass as the helicopter moved away. And so we anticipate, right now, we're only anticipating, I think, 6 days of helicopter use. So it's mainly to bring in the staging and then to take everything out at the end of the deal. So we'll have specific calendarized days when the helicopters are flying, and we will share that not with the county and also with the hiking community. But the trail is really damaged, and so it's actually, the Forest Service has a wooden post 2x6 blockage of where the trail takes off from the old Edison Catway Road. So we're anticipating a lot less human traffic than we had last time.
Any other questions from?
And one other thing before you go, because you mentioned it, we've done fish surveys of the entire creek from the debris basin up to the debris net, correct?
Yeah, and that was done in March, and that was to inform the agencies of what was present after we had all of the rain events in January and February. And then they could better make a decision. There are no fish in that section of the creek. And so it was Department of Fish and Wildlife's preference to wait as long as possible to get out of the nesting bird season. And that influenced, but most of the waiting was because of the need to acquire the Army Corps permits and regional board, and because of access. And earlier in the spring, there was so much water up there that access wasn't safe, and also it been really hard to work in those conditions. Now the water's come down pretty significantly, so we can divert it out of the way.
You had a question?
Yeah, just for information, the location is the SY7A.
Yes.
Is that right? I don't know if that's,
Yes.
it's been generally referred to, but I think, so that's the upper reach.
Yes.
Okay, and that is the only area that of significant buildup behind the nets, debris, et cetera, only occurred at that location.
Yes, and it's the furthest up in all of the channels. And so that is the only one that was impacted by the storms in 2023.
And do you anticipate that will be an area in the future to maybe where debris may collect more than often, or it's just a matter of an event and how it's spread out? Or is there anything particular to this location that may, give a heads up ahead of time that this may be a location that will accumulate more than the other locations or not? It's just serendipitous, or?
Well, I'll let you speak to that because I know Larry Garola, who's a geologist we're working with, went up there and looked at it, but it is just below the confluence of two channels, and the falls is right up there. So in that spot, there's a lot more movement of material than you would have further down the channel where it's just straight and incised. But I know Larry went up there.
And we're really interested. We have Waterways Consulting work with us, with the hydrologist organization, and then also to engineering geologists. So we're really interested in looking what the character of the debris is, because right now you're just looking at a net at the surface. So what actually blocked it? Because we had about 5 feet of freeboard along the bottom of the net. So we're really interested in seeing what the character of that debris is. Because there's been a lot of speculation by looking at a remote photo about what it consists of, and we want to get a real professional analysis.
Oh, okay, for distribution of both the sediments, et cetera, and the debris. The dispersal would be dependent on what type of debris it is. Correct.
Yeah.
And then you would classify the categories and disperse appropriately.
Yeah, so I mean, we'll separate out the woody debris and put that in appropriate places, especially large boulders. There's a fair amount of space on both sides of the net upstream, on both sides of the channel. So that's where most of the debris will go. And the idea is to put a certain amount of it below the 2-year flood line. So you're right close to the channel, and the rest of it goes up above between the 2-year and the 100-year flow line, so that the idea is to let the material reintroduce naturally with each storm, like as much as we can mimic natural process like that. So there will be a little bit of sorting. Eventually, it's just going to be built up on the sides and it's going to come in however it does. But we would stabilize most of that material and leave as little as possible in the channel where you're going to get it washed out every single time it rains.
I have 2 questions. One, can you refresh our memory on how this is being funded, this removal?
I think Pat's better to speak to that.
Well, the whole operation has been funded by public donations and foundations for the original concept of the whole project. But for the clean out, we, through Congressman Carvajal, we've been classified as an eligible applicant as a public nonprofit for FEMA reimbursement. So FEMA will cover 94% of the cost of the clean out.
So
And
maintenance will in general be taking, do you have to, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to
Sorry.
interrupt.
the FEMA it's only dealing with the debris. All the maintenance still goes to us.
And it's specific one time only, and then you would have to renew every time if there's another debris buildup like this.
Yeah, I think our main hurdle was being the first time anything
Right,
like
of
this had
course.
been done. So, but we've been successful at that, and it's been a long process. And the one thing we really didn't anticipate is the length of time that triggering the Army Corps participation, because then it went to NOAA and NIPS as well too, right? So National Marine Fisheries and NOAA. So that, I think we turned it over to Army Corps in mid-June.
Beginning of June was when the permit application was filed. There was some back and forth about whether they wanted to do it as an emergency permit or whether they could, or whether they had to do it under a nationwide permit program. So the fish surveys were done in March, and then between then and June, they decided on how they wanted the application process to go through, and we ended up filing a standard.
I have one more question, Pat. As I recall, when we were originally looking at alternative designs, and fortunately, this great design option came in front of the nonprofit that, was started for this particular project. I noticed that in the Alps, when they did these things, they didn't empty them. They left them oftentimes full.
Yeah, they operated as check dams after that, but we went into this knowing we were the first installation of this type in endangered species habitat in the United States and in Santa Barbara County. So that was the rules of the game were the rules of the game. And in here, it's always been, we have to clean it up. And I appreciate everybody's patience as we work our way through this. We've really appreciated it. We didn't anticipate the Army Corps having this for 90 days, which they've had it, and it looks that's coming to an end now. So,
is there anybody else has any comments before we close this portion of this conversation? John?
Mr. Chair, no, we don't have any comments. I appreciate your questions because of the storm events that we had earlier this year. Our inquiries make sound, and we're just here to, on consent to receive and file the report as our recommendation. And we will be back early next year with the report for 2023.
Well, we're very grateful that the cooperation between private sector and the public sector doing things like this is something that we would all wish for in other areas. But thank you for coming up and speaking to us and your expertise. Oh, and then public comments. Mr. Villalobos, is there anybody want to mention a word?
No request for this item.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. Any final comment?
no, just thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
So, Mr. Chair.
Take care.
Go ahead. Staff is recommending, is asking for a motion to receive and
Okay.
file.
All right.
I so move to receive and file the 2022 annual monitoring report of Montecito debris flow mitigation project.
One second.
All those in favor? Aye. No help from our secretary or? He's busy down there, isn't he? Anyway, thank you. And I think that fulfills that first item. It was consent, but it was nice to get a little bit of information from him. Thank you for going along with it. Okay. I didn't force you to.
No.
All right, so moving on to the standard agenda. David, you want to, or Mr.
Yeah, I'm
Villalobos, introduce us?
Yeah, sorry, I was trying to communicate with our TV staff. Not an issue, but
Take your time. We got all day.
Montecito Planning Commission will receive and file the annual parking conditions report as required by conditions number 52, 55, 84, 93, 94, 95. The approved Miramar Beach Resort and Bungalows proposed revised project case number 14 RVP 63.
Okay.
Morning, Mr. Chair, Commissioners. I'm Eric Graham. I'm the compliance planner here in South County. And this morning, compliance staff is presenting the annual parking reports for the Miramar Hotel for the years
Speak a
2020.
little bit louder, please.
Sure, for the years 2021 and 2022.
No, just kidding. Thanks. Hey, can you hold on a second? David, are we good? What's slide?
Black. Up on top.
Right, that's what I was trying to get on the CSD.
You want us to
They're not
wait?
responding.
We can see your message, just so you know.
Other than that, it's good.
Yeah, don't say anything.
Okay. Okay, we're good.
Oh, okay.
Can you go back one slide? So just a brief refresher on the history of the project. So the Miramar Hotel project was approved by the Board of Supervisors in April of 2015, with construction beginning about a year later in spring of 2016. About 3.5 years later, construction was completed with final occupancy on the hotel project granted on November 25th, 2019. Just a second. The approved project includes several conditions of approval which require monitoring by staff and annual reporting. Hence the reason for our briefing today. Next slide, please.
He's busy.
Multitasking. So the conditions requiring reporting are condition number 52, which is related to the parking decal program, which requires the use of decals to clarify, clearly identify hotel employee vehicles. Condition number 55, which requires the hotel to develop a parking plan, which specifies management of over 400 parking spaces on site. Condition number 84 requires the hotel to document the number of annual events on site, any potential parking impacts. Condition number 93, which requires management of employee vehicles, employee parking, and employee modes of transportation. Condition number 94 requires the use of an automated parking system for the associate parking lot, which is the employee parking lot. And condition number 95, which requires management of excursion bus parking at the hotel. Next slide, please. Excuse me. So as far as compliance is concerned, P&D has received no complaints related to the Miramar Hotel's parking conditions in the years 2021 and 2022. The staff's conducted inspections both on and off site during the reporting periods, has confirmed that the Miramar Hotel has been in compliance with the requirements highlighted above. Additionally, no violations were noted during the inspections by staff. Next slide. Of note, in addition to the conditions required in annual reporting, condition number 66 allows for the applicant to request an increase in beach club membership after approximately 24 to 36 months occupancy. The number of memberships can be increased to up to 300 memberships from the currently approved 200 memberships pending review by this commission. Currently, there is no request by the applicant for membership increase. Next slide. And then our recommended actions today are compliance staff recommends that this commission receive and file the 2021 and 2022 annual parking conditions report as required by the project conditions of approval. David, would it be possible to skip 2 slides? 1, 2, 1 more. And then for purposes of complaint, we just wanted to update and let everybody know what the contact information is. If you do have complaints to compliance staff or the hotel, we're providing this contact information to the public.
So is there a reason why that you skipped that one?
That would be for the applicant if they wanted to use that. We were
I
pulling
see.
that back for the applicant. Sorry about that. I put that wrong, they were slightly wrong.
Not information we would glean in court.
No.
Okay.
But if you'd like to see that slide, we could.
I'm kind of curious. I'm kind of a aerial kind of guy.
So those indicates the parking lot locations and in addition, the required beach access through the hotel. So that concludes my presentation. Staff's available for questions. Also, the applicant, Mr. Bryce Ross, representing the Hotel Caruso, is also on Zoom and available to answer questions.
I have a couple of questions, I think. If you mind? You want to go?
Yeah, I've received a couple of calls from representatives of the Miramar and also spoken with people who live in the neighborhood. And it seems like people in the public are more directed to call the Miramar and report if there's an issue. But then that circumvents the county really understanding any complaints about the parking. So to me, at least, it seems like there should be some kind of signage about where the public can file with the county, just so that it's accurate what's going on with the parking. Because
You know,
if everything is being handled at the hotel, then the report doesn't really reflect necessarily to the commission what the community's experiencing.
just for 1 second.
Sure.
I've been reminded that it sounds like there was some ex parte disclosures that would be important. I didn't ask for it, so it's just not your fault. But when we have these kind of conversations we need to say we have, but
Beforehand.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was waiting
But-
for.
anyway, it's kind of a little late for that now, but go right ahead.
Oh.
Sorry.
Well, that was just my comment from just reading the letters that we received and speaking to people at the Miramar. It would just be nice if the hotel and the county came up with something that was posted. Show people if they are experiencing a problem.
Do you hear what she's saying there? What do you?
So I'll defer to staff. I mean,
Okay.
in short, this is a report on the conditions already in place. So we're not here to change anything. We're not here to modify anything. So
Okay,
we're actually just reporting status quo of what the earlier commission approved. But I'll defer to staff if they have anything else to add.
But if it's saying that there's been no complaints to the county, you know, it just, a lot of people don't know who to complain to, so. You know, I just think clarification on that would be helpful.
so Mr. Chair, Commissioners Stahl. In talking with staff, we have not received any complaints. And I think some of the people that submitted some comment letters have had previous history with who to know, who to contact with staff. So, but that was a couple years ago, so I don't know, you know, if they just lost the contact information. But I know that it has been fairly well and made aware to the public that if you do have concerns, to reach out to either the staff at Planning and Development or the property owner. We're not aware of any recent complaints that have been not filed or anything like that. I think people know generally who to contact.
I think you're right as far as the people who've been involved with complaining over the years, but someone who puts his first complaint in, how do they know that it's getting back to the county in the same intensity or clarity? I think it's some of your
Right,
questions.
I mean, I'm just, in 2 years to say that there's not been one complaint, I mean, well, Montecito complaint, so I'm just, you know, curious how,
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Stahl, I mean, we can create a communication path with the hotel and check on that. The idea was that anyone who had a complaint in the neighborhood would contact the hotel first for a more immediate resolution. And if they weren't getting the resolution they wanted, they would then elevate to staff.
Okay,
So in the sense that we're not getting complaints, it seems as though the hotel is adequately addressing those complaints. If there are people in the community who don't think that's happening, we would encourage them to contact Planning and Development.
but just, I mean, regular people going to the beach, trying to use those spots that are allocated for people going to the beach. And just never finding a parking place. Those are the issues that I think just something being posted, or even if you and if the county and the hotel joined forces and sent out a letter to the immediate neighborhood, just, you know, Jameson, Danielson, Humphrey Road, the people around there who, you know, are impacted.
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Stahl, so we do have, you know, on the P&D website, there is already a webpage if you do want to file a complaint. So it's, you know, if you said, hey, who would I complain to? It's in the county's jurisdiction. You could go to the Planning and Development website and there is an opportunity to file a complaint as well. So it's not like we don't have already an opportunity for the public to access us. I'm not resistant to your request. It's just that we're not having a lot of historically a lot of reporting issues. And so, you know, I don't know if and maybe this is a question too for the hotel operators, see what outreach they've done, if anything. I know they're available today, but we don't have, yeah, we just haven't received enough that would say, oh, hey, there's a real problem out here to justify sending out a letter campaign, sort of what you're suggesting. And we have the availability, there is already a path for people to file complaints on the Planning and Development website. So I don't know if the operator has other information they may want us to
But that's
share.
like a lot of steps from some guy who's just there in his truck with a surfboard, you know, to go on to the Planning and Development and for complaints and all that. It just seems not realistic that the people who want to go to the beach are gonna go to that much, you know, many steps to complain. So I'm just trying to make it easier for the community and the hotel to coexist.
okay. So well, we have the hotel on, so where are you, Bryce? Are you up there somewhere? We can have
They
you.
I'm here,
seem
Chair
very
Police.
polite.
Can you hear me, Chair Police?
Yes, we can, Mr. Rice, go right ahead.
Super. Well, good morning, Chair Police, Commissioners and staff. My name, and I know most of you, is Bryce Ross. I'm Executive Vice President with Caruso, who's the owner of the Rosewood Miramar. It's my pleasure to be here today. It's hard to believe that we opened the Miramar just over 4 years ago, and we're very proud to be part of the Montecito community. As you know, we are very focused on being a good neighbor, a good partner for Montecito, and bringing joy to the lives of the community, our guests, and our neighbors. We are in constant communication and constantly engaging with our neighbors in the community to seek out feedback, thoughts, ideas, and input. And we truly appreciate this communication that we receive back. It allows us to make the Miramar the place that it is to best serve the community in all aspects. And we continue to strive to do that day in and day out. We were last here before the commission for our compliance reporting period in mid-December 2020. And we're here today and happy to report with a staff report that shows that we are in compliance with our conditions again for 21 and 22. As I mentioned a few moments ago, Caruso and Rosewood are dedicated to being a positive contributor to the Montecito community and a responsive neighbor. This year alone, we've sent out 3 letters to all of our immediate neighbors, inviting them to participate and provide us thoughts and ideas and feedback. And that's something that we do in regular course. And my contact information, email address, how to contact me through our Miramar info email address has been listed on that. But I also encourage, as I did back in 2020, encourage anyone with any thoughts or conditions to simply call the hotel. Call 805-900-8388. Ask for our resort managing director, our resort manager, our director of security, and share any thoughts or ideas. We want to hear them. We are a group that encourages it. We're not the group that hides behind it. And I would be more than happy in my next letter that I send out to our neighbors to, again, include that contact information, because we want to hear these thoughts. You know, Commissioner Stahl, I appreciate your thoughts on wanting to make sure that parking is available for, you know, beach access and whatnot. And, you know, we are fully supportive of the county's efforts to put restrictions on that parking, because right now, candidly, it says it's beach parking. And while we control to make sure that none of our guests or employees are parking in those spaces, we have no ability to influence what the general community or folks from outside the community spaces. So if the county desires to have time restricted signs put up on that spaces, no overnight, we would be fully supportive of that. And with that, I can answer any further questions that you may have.
I think you've been really receptive to feedback. I think it's a good relationship with the county.
Thank you.
I just have one recommendation, is that it's always been the biggest issue, parking, because of the desire to, for no bad reasons, but for maybe just simply good reasons, to have the maximum usage of your property. And I know going forward, you have some other projects coming our way or to the county. And I would just hope that this issue, that it stays in the forefront of its importance, the local parking issue. I know you have plans for other things like increased parking, but we don't have to go into that today. I know it's for a different time, but we do get a lot of calls about parking. So it's just, even though you're doing your best, it's still a tight situation there.
Chair Palice, you have my commitment that guest experience, community experience, availability of parking, and convenience for everyone that visits the Miramar and the Miramar Beach area is front and center of our attention. And, you know, we're that is here for the long haul. We're here for 100 years or plus is the way that we think about things. So anything that we do, the way that we operate, the way that we engage with the community, all those things matter to us, and they have to be thought about very carefully and thoughtfully. So I appreciate your comment, and I assure you it's front and center for us.
Okay, Donnie.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yes, ex parte, I've met with Mr. Ross on several occasions discussing parking, and have had excellent communication and discussions. The question of public parking on South Jameson, we have discussed. And I do think that if the county could participate in advancing restrictions hourly, perhaps, of course, it's Coastal Commission, it's very very complicated. But I think signage would be most helpful regarding overnight and perhaps a limited amount for beach, say 6 hours. It would, the other side of the equation is enforcement, which is up to the county. The hotel is not good to enforce that. And I don't know if the county has the bandwidth to go out and enforce overnight parking, if there's but perhaps you've had some discussions regarding enforcement that maybe that wouldn't be a barrier to this.
Thank you, Commissioner Seno. I have had conversations with the county, in fact, dating back to 2020, when, shortly after we opened. And I know there's definitely a desire for the county to look at some restrictions. Right now, as I mentioned before, it is signed all along Jameson and Eucalyptus as beach public access parking. But again, it's always been a question of enforcement. And what's been indicated to me is that there is availability for enforcement now, and it is processing through the county to see that come to fruition. And as I mentioned before, we're in full support.
Thank you.
We've had an experience with enforcing that in other areas in the county, especially Montecito, the hot springs trails. It's not easy to have enforcement without difficulties with getting tow trucks, and it's the various things, but we do encourage you to just try to advance and develop the best possible scenario as far as refraining from having others park there besides who's intended to park there. But I know it's not up to you, but your leadership is important and we appreciate it.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, anything else? Speaking of ex parte, I guess I spoke to him as well for doing pretty poor on ex parte information. But anyway, thank you very much, Mr. Ross, and see you next time. Oh, do we have a public comment? I'm sure we might. What do you think, David?
So I have not received any slips. If anyone would like to speak, go ahead and fill out a slip and turn it in before you leave. And then we do have someone online. Not sure what item this is for. If you would like to speak, go ahead and raise your hand, virtual hand, and I'll call on you. Not seeing a hand raised.
Okay. Well, again, thank you for showing up. Appreciate it.
Thank you, and staff. Have a wonderful weekend.
You too. Need a motion to move this along? Okay. David, give a motion.
Oh. Sure. I so move that we receive and file the Miramar Hotel condition compliance update.
Okay. I second that. All those in favor? Aye. Okay, thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Good job. Aaron, you didn't say much, but you we can always count on you. A few words. Okay, so moving on to Stuart Whitman's investing track map. Extra quick planner.
Are you ready?
Oh, yes, we take your seat.
We have an extra chair
Yeah,
somewhere here.
Here's that chip right here. It's all yours, of course.
One in a chair. We got one over here. Grab a chair. Put this in here. Hold up. Sorry. Sitting too long. Mr. Villalobos, can I introduce this?
Absolutely. Following the chair, at the request of the property owner, Scott L. Whitman, to consider case number for approval, that's intended track map and adoption of the proposed final mitigated negative declaration, case number 22 NGD pursuant to the state guidelines for implementation of the California environmental quality.
Okay, presentation by staff. All right, go right ahead.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and members of the commission. My name is Veronica King, and I will be presenting the proposal for the Stuart Whitman Inc. Vesting Tentative Draft Map Project. Next slide. This is the vicinity map, an aerial view of the proposed project site, situated between Oak Creek to the west and San Ysidro Road to the east in the Montecito Inland area. The 13.02 acre parcel is located at 749 San Ysidro Road and is zone 3E1. Both Oak Creek and an unnamed ephemeral drainage channel are mapped as ESH and are outlined in blue in the figure to the right. Oak Creek borders the property to the west, and the unnamed ephemeral drainage bisects the project site. Next slide, please. Here are some photos of the site. Starting from the top left is the photo representing Oak Creek. The photo in the top center is representative of the undeveloped portion of the project site. To the right is the unnamed drainage, and at the bottom we have an aerial photo of the existing on-site development. The property is currently developed with a single-family dwelling, a guest house, 2 detached garages, barn, tennis court, and a swimming pool, all of which are proposed for demolition as part of the map request. This development is concentrated in the northwestern portion of the existing parcel. Next slide, please. The proposed project is the request for approval of a vesting tentative tract map to subdivide the subject lot into 4 lots, ranging in size from 3.03 to 3.54 acres. Proposed development envelopes within each lot are shown in purple on the screen, and existing development to be demolished is depicted in black. The only construction proposed with the tract map is a shared access driveway, drainage improvements for the shared access driveway, utilities along the shared access driveway to be stubbed at each proposed lot, a large planter and fountain at the cul-de-sac, and an entry gate. Access to the site will be provided off of San Ysidro Road via the new 20-foot wide shared entry drive. Grading consists of 780 cubic yards of cut and 960 cubic yards of fill, with 180 cubic yards of import. 2 coast live oak trees are anticipated to be removed as a result of construction of the shared driveway and related drainage basin. All existing on-site development will be demolished, removed from the site, and properly discarded prior to final map recordation. No individual lot development is proposed at this time. When future residential development is proposed on individual lots, it will be subject to all applicable conditions of this map, as well as ordinance standards and policies applicable to the specific proposal. Next slide. As part of the proposed project, the applicant is requesting an ESH buffer reduction in the areas shown in red on the screen. The Montecito Community Plan has a policy that requires a 50-foot buffer from the top of bank of the creek and the unnamed drainage. The policy allows the buffer to be reduced when the request is supported by a bio-assessment and through consultation with CDFW and the Water Board. Staff coordinated with both resource agencies and determined that a buffer reduction is appropriate in this case. The work within the ESH and buffer areas includes widening of an existing driveway necessary for site access, drainage improvements, and demolition of existing structures and hardscape. Next slide, please. The tract map is consistent with the comprehensive plan, including the Montecito Community Plan and all policies such as adequate services and cultural resources as outlined in the staff report. Additionally, the project is consistent with all applicable biopolicies as mitigation measures have been applied to reduce impacts to bioresources, including Oak Creek and the unnamed drainage, through implementation of a habitat restoration plan and a tree assessment and protection plan. Next slide, please. The project is consistent with the MLUDC, including the purpose and intent of the E1 zone district, residential zone lot standards, setbacks, height limit, and stream habitat buffers. Additionally, the project is consistent with all of Chapter 21 subdivision regulations, including those pertaining to lot area, width, depth, and lot lines. Next slide, please. A M&D was prepared for the project and circulated for public comment from March 22nd to April 24th. The M&D found potentially significant but mitigable impacts in the issue areas listed on the screen. All impact areas have been mitigated to below significant levels. The main impacts associated with the project are related to bioresources. The M&D identified 8 mitigation measures that will minimize impacts to wetlands, riparian habitats, native grasslands, oak woodlands and forests, individual native trees, and other rare habitat types. Among those include pre-con wildlife surveys, a tree assessment and protection plan, and a habitat restoration plan. Staff recommends your commission take the following actions. 1, make the required findings for approval of the project. 2, adopt the proposed final mitigated negative declaration. And 3, approve the project subject to the conditions of approval. That concludes my presentation. Staff is available for questions.
Thank you. Very good.
Sure, before we have any questions, can we do ex parte?
Yes. Thank you for reminding us. Yes.
Well, I am acquainted with either personally or do business with all the people on the easement that's to the south of this project. I haven't spoken with any of them since becoming a commissioner, but prior to becoming a commissioner, I had clients interested in a property to the north of the Whitman property that is accessed off of East Mountain Drive. And because of my client's interest in that property, I went online and did some research. The whole Whitman property had been on the market previously. And I reached out to Veronica King at that time, maybe December of 2022. And she provided me with a copy of the map that was available at that time. And I shared that with my clients and the other agent representing the home that was being considered for purchase by my clients. So that purchase never took place, and that's the extent.
Done.
Yeah, I met with the applicant's representative, Mr. Fort, on a site visit. I believe it was Wednesday of this week, and probably had a half-hour tour, boots on the ground, and it was very informative.
Likewise, I met with the charming agent for the applicant, and it was also interesting to see the property. Curious about some questions that I'd like to address, but well, thank you for being there. That concludes ex parte, so we'll move on to questions, if that's okay or not. Oh, okay.
I have no questions at this time for staff.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You were gonna proceed and
We're up.
yeah, why not?
Sure. David, you're gonna run the slides.
Yeah, give me just a second.
He's been busy over there, so
Yeah.
I've been sort of stalling a little bit.
I'm Steve Fort with Suzanne Ellis Planning and Permitting, agent for our client Scott Whitman, who is here today, representing the Stuart Whitman Inc. And also with us today is Jessica Peak, who you met before on the net project, and then Don Donaldson, our civil engineer, is here as well. Give David a second here. I will say we've had a robust entitlement, process to get to this point today, and I want to thank Ms. King and Mr. Darville for getting us to this point in the hearing today. We're excited to be here. We do have a project that's proposing to create these 4 lots out of this 13-acre existing parcel. And also, it's really going to restore the landscape. to remove some existing development from within that top of bank setback. So it really is a beneficial project to the site overall, we think, in the environment around Oak Creek. We can go to the next slide, David, please. So there's the site, and the red line, which I'm gonna come back to this, but the red line is the boundary of the 3E1 zone that we're located in. So it's not only this parcel, it's the parcels to the west, and then that 3E1 zone also flows down to the south as well. You could go to the next slide, please, David. Just some photos of the existing house and some accessory structures that are proposed to be demolished. We did do a historic report on the house, and it was found to have no historic significance. The tennis court and the house are both infiltrate into the top of bank setback, and those will be demoed and removed. And then there's just some site photos there of the sort of the interior of the site. Next slide, please, David. Here, just showing, I think one of the high points of this project is that it's using an existing access off of San Ysidro Road, and we aren't proposing additional curb cuts off of San Ysidro Road. Just some shots of the road and the existing driveway. And then the bottom right is looking down that driveway as it enters into the property. Next slide, David, please. This is a copy of one of the pages of the map. I thought this was the simplest one that was boldest and showed where the proposed lot lines were for each of the lots. Each lot is, it's 3E1 zoning. Each lot is proposed to be at least 3 acres. I think we can go to the next slide, David. I have some copies of the map here. Each of the lots is shown there. The development envelopes are shown with the dark dashed line. Again, respecting the top of bank setback from Oak Creek, 50 feet, and also setback from I think it's in red there, that unnamed drainage that runs down through the property. So we're staying away from that, staying away from Oak Creek. We've got a couple of little bump outs here and there that we worked through as staff, that we agreed that there were some groups of oak trees or other trees that we would keep out of those development envelopes. A few things to note, that easement that runs to the 3 lots to the west is off-site. You can see it there just below the kind of the last bold line there. That's off-site. There are oak trees along there that are outside the development envelopes, and there's oak trees in sort of that bigger area just above the easement to the left.
What lot are you referring to?
I'm talking about the easement that runs along the south.
Of that riparian easement?
Not the riparian easement, the access.
Oh, the bottom.
The access
Okay.
easement that gets to the 3 lots to the west. It's off-site. We have no ability to use that easement, and we have no intention of using that easement. There's no legal right or legal connection to use it for future residences or for construction. There's no intention or right to use it. There are some oak trees along there that not proposing to touch those oak trees. And then there's additional oak trees in the southwest corner that we're not proposing anything there as well. We're not proposing removing those trees. You can see, we are going up towards the top of the map. We are using that existing access off San Ysidro Road, coming in along the same alignment, and then we're gonna, as Ms. King pointed out, one of the components of this map is that we're gonna build a new shared driveway. The driveway will cut down and terminate at that roundabout that the fire department has looked at, and they're okay with it right now. There will be utilities stubbed out to each of these lots, just stubbed and kind of left there for future residences to connect to. And another key thing too is, you see, I think it's lots 4 and 1 actually will come down and meet San Ysidro Road at the 90-degree turn there. One of the conditions of this map, should it get approved, the map will have a note on it that says that that will relinquish any potential rights to access San Ysidro Road from the south end there. So the map will state there is no access allowed from the south end. All the access to these lots will be through the shared driveway that we're proposing at the top. Next slide, David, please. It's really just another copy of the map with the photo underneath it. You'll see part of in going through this with planning and development, you know, we had to establish these development envelopes. And there are certain oak trees that you'll see, I guess they have X's on them, that are within those development envelopes that we're mitigating for. We kind of have to, with planning and development, assume that, hey, those trees could be impacted or removed in the future. So we've considered them as part of our removal, and we are mitigating for those oak trees.
Pardon me a second.
Yeah.
Didn't you just say that the only trees that are coming out are in the road easement off of San Isidro?
There's potential, so there are 2 for sure that are within the shared driveway, and then
Yes.
there are 9 additional that are within the development envelopes that are going to be mitigated for. So 33 will be planted to mitigate for the
So
removed oaks.
we're saying historical trees, big trees will be mitigated with little trees.
What is the size?
We have 15 gallon
Okay, yeah.
at 3 to 1.
And to confirm, only 2 have been targeted for removal. The others may be removed.
Yeah.
But they are not targeted to be removed at this time. They are throughout each lot in different areas. And the mitigation for those, you are anticipating that they will be removed. They may not be, but even if they are not removed, you're still going to mitigate 3 to 1, 15 gallons. Is that right?
Right.
Okay.
And that
Thank
comes
you.
before the MBAR's presentations, after you put forth lots, the actual building sites.
Those will come up. Individual lot owners may propose to remove those trees or work with them. There.
Well, since we're asking some pop questions, we just throw a couple at you real quick. Like, hate to do this, but you talk about stub out. So right now, all we have is that roundabout or that circle cul-de-sac that ends the termination of the. Would you just put the stubs there because you don't know where the actual driveways will be?
We have some kind of driveways sketched in there, and I
You do?
presume we would stub. You'll see them, they're kind of like cones. There's
Oh.
kind of one at each lot. And a lighter dash line. Yeah.
I see.
We don't have a pointer.
We
There's
just
no
stub
pointer.
utilities there.
There, okay.
Kind of waiting for connection in the future.
Okay. And so my understanding is that this demolition will occur prior to the recording of this map, if it gets recorded?
We're required, conditioned to demo before the map gets recorded, because when the map gets recorded, it will establish these new lot lines. And the existing house and I think the accessory structure will overlap those lot lines, and we can't do that.
Okay, I'm sorry to interrupt
No,
you.
it's all right.
You can continue with your slideshow here.
Go to the next slide, David. Oh, so going back to that, I mentioned that we're in the 3E1 zone, and the 3E1, 3 acre minimum lot size continues from this property to the west to capture those 3 properties, and then it comes down to the south. And on the next couple of slides, next slide, please, just demonstrating that our sites, the star, and then there are other properties in the neighborhood with blue dots that are 3 acres or pretty close. Some of them are 2.9, 2.7, 3, 3.4, high 2s. And then even to the south on the next slide, our subject lot is starred again. To the south of us, there are additional lots that are at least 3 acres or 2.7, 2.9. Just to demonstrate that the size of the lots we're proposing are compatible with the rest of the neighborhood here. And next slide, David. So just a few points I wanted to make to make sure they get out. Some key considerations. We aren't requesting any modifications. We're proposing lots that are consistent with the minimum lot size. We're using that existing access, our driveway turnarounds and turnouts are okayed by the fire department. Utilities along San Ysidro Road we're gonna be conditioned to underground those utilities to the extent we can. We mentioned the development envelopes and the setbacks. The existing hardscape structures will be pulled out of that top of bank setback from Oak Creek. So improving that situation. We will have a habitat restoration plan and tree protection plan that'll need to be in place and submitted before we record, and we'll get to a little more on that in a few minutes. We're served by Montecito Water, Montecito Sanitary District, and the fire department when we have their service letters. Again, the only development that is requested to be vested with approval of this map is the driveway and 2 culverts, the turnarounds and the turnouts associated with the driveway, the stubbed out utilities, drainage improvements to handle the drainage from the shared driveway, and then an entry gate. In the future residences, they'll be required to be reviewed and approved, design review through MBAR. They'll be noticed as well. They'll require land use permit. They'll all have their own post-construction stormwater plans. They'll be reviewed by Project Clean Water and Flood Control, reviewed by the fire department. They'll have their construction related conditions. Fuel management plans will be required, erosion and sediment control plans, traffic management plans like for during construction. And then there'll be construction notices, notably when we have to build that shared driveway. Any impact to pedestrians and folks walking along San Ysidro Road, we're required condition to notice neighbors and have a flag hand out there, in as much as we might be impacting people's ability to walk along San Ysidro where the driveway meets the road. And next slide, David. Please. Again, the oaks in the southwest corner and along that southern boundary, adjacent to that access easement, those are going to stay. They're outside the development envelopes, not proposed to be removed. I'll show you where those mitigation oaks are going to be planted in a moment here. No intention to use that easement. Height of future residences is measured from existing grade. So any future residences, their height will be measured from the grade, the topography that's out there right now. But the way the development envelopes are situated, no structures in the future would be located closer to Oak Creek than where that existing residence is, because that existing residence actually encroaches into that creek setback. Our conditions of approval, that they require permit compliance monitoring. So Mr. Graham, who was here before, will be out there monitoring the work on the shared driveway. And the future residences, I'm sure, will have permit compliance as well. We have conditions about construction hours, dust control, equipment requirements, site upkeep and cleanliness while the work's going on, worker orientation, and then we are required to have designated storage areas for equipment and washouts and things like that on site. Again, the conditions require MBAR review for future residences. There's conditions about the building materials and the retaining walls being compatible, and future lighting being night sky compliant, and future lighting would be reviewed by MBAR as well. Undergrounding utilities along San Ysidro. Interesting note, just in terms of the grade out there. The property, actually the southern end, was used as a stockpile. It got an emergency permit through planning and development years ago in the 90s. So that grade at the bottom isn't necessarily a natural grade, but it's been so long now that you don't even really notice it. Truck trips will always be through the existing driveway, the shared access driveway, nothing using that easement to the south. The truck trips for the demo that are included in the MND, they were estimated by the consultant that did the MND based on the size of the house, the size of the accessory structure, and the amount of hardscape it's due to be demolished. And I mentioned about relinquishing the abutters rights at the south end, that future owners will not have the right to access San Ysidro from the south end of those parcels. Next slide, David, please. So with regard to the habitat restoration, we are mitigating for the impacts to coast live oaks and the willows. The willows are being mitigated for a 3-to-1 ratio. We're planting 33 oaks for the 11 impacted oak trees. Again, it's 2 that we know of and 9 could or may not be impacted in the future. And then along those areas along Oak Creek and along that unnamed drainage, as part of our habitat restoration, we are proposing to remove invasive plants and sort of restore the native vegetation and sort of reestablish that in a more natural and native condition. Next slide, David. It's going to show where we're proposing to do this. Green dots are where, generally where we're proposing to plant those oaks in that southwest corner and along that drainage. And the light blue area is where we're proposing to mitigate with willows. And then the green is where we're going to do that, weed removal of invasives and sort of restore those areas. The shaded area, hatched area is the area that will be impacted by the new driveway coming in. That's not the footprint of the driveway, but that's the area that we anticipate would be impacted by building. Next slide, David. So just to conclude, we're consistent with all the policies that Ms. King included in her staff report, especially that community plan goal about protecting and encouraging diversity of housing and maintaining a predominantly large lot, single family identity. But we're consistent with visual resource, biological and water resource policies. Again, future development subject to MBAR, subject to P&D LUPs. And we would just ask that you make the findings for approval and adopt the MND and approve us subject to all those conditions of approval that we've agreed to. That's it. We're here for questions and I appreciate your time.
Well, we'll start with Sandy. You want to go first?
Okay, it's just interesting to me when we go through this project that you've looked at the riparian trees and fish, frogs, but there's no neighborhood impact report. And I mean, I know that's not something that's required, but even with the idea that you could possibly be planting 33 oak trees, is there any sort of report or visual on how those trees being planted are going to impact the homes below, next door, and above? Because 33 oak trees, as they grow, can be very significant in terms of what the neighbors are looking at then compared to what they look at now. So that's one question.
Well, if you want to dive in, we've not done like a visual impact assessment of where those oaks will go. I think we've placed them, located them on that map in places that we think they will survive and that there will be, the mitigation will work. But Jessica wanted to add something. Yep.
If you can pull up the graphic that shows the restoration areas, that might be helpful.
Yeah, I think this question begs another question, is that if you know that you possibly want to move X amount of trees or remove and plant these trees, then that means that you have an idea where the building envelope for houses might be.
Sure.
And so, I know this is part of MBAR, not part of what we're doing. We're just approving a map, but we also are sensitive to the neighborhood's understanding, because some people might want to sell their property. If they can't sell it, they don't know where the house is going to be built. And so if there's any information that, the options for lot 1, the options for lot 2, I mean, that would really be helpful to the neighbors to know what that's like, because I know you're not required, but I think that as our role is to enhance, the neighborhood as we have it now, and not necessarily to grow it, even though it's part of our obligation is to allow growth or permit it. But I'm just curious that when you say you're going to remove trees, and you actually pointed out a few to me that I thought were pretty much near the middle of lot 1, and there were some that were quite beautiful specimens and some not as pretty. But if you knew that, is that possible to share that, or is that something you don't want to do?
Well, I think what you're asking is, have we done like a study of what future residences might look like or where they might
Not look like, where
sit?
they will be.
Well, we haven't studied that. I mean, I think it would be reasonable to think that they'll probably be towards the middle of those envelopes or up towards the top, because people are gonna, probably wanna take advantage of a view. The further they are up. And also, I think they're gonna, I think you could imagine that, okay, coming off the roundabout or the shared driveway, there's probably gonna be a motor court or something, a parking type of thing towards the top of the envelopes. And then a house would be on the other side of the motor courts, or I'm using that term loosely, driveway, turnaround. So I think you could presume that the north end of those three lots will probably be turnaround, driveway, and then transition to a house in some manner.
But if you're talking about people taking advantage of the views in future homes, and at the same time, there's no, consideration for existing views that people are enjoying now. And I think that's at least my biggest concern, is that for those to be developed, people are gonna wanna go to the top, they're gonna wanna enhance, or present as big views as they possibly can of the ocean, maybe, but for sure the mountains. And it just seems like, understandably, the development envelopes and everything else are for the benefit of the people putting these lots together, but.
Mr. Chair, if I could just mention real quick.
Yes.
So the Montecito Community Plan does have goals and policies that allow planning and development to require review by BAR. And there is a mitigation measure that also requires that for future development. And those policies do allow the MBAR to look at private views and analyze that as part of their review. And they can use the tools within the design guidelines to help craft projects to protect private views. So I think.
But there are no guaranteed view easements in place in
That is correct.
Montecito. So it just seems like this would be the appropriate time to.
Well, here's the reason why it's appropriate, Joe, is like, it's not so much that we want to, evaluate where the house will be built, if it could be built there. It's just that it's going to take time. By the time the demo gets done, the MBAR gets an application, and by the time it gets in front of them. So we're talking maybe a year or more, and it just restricts the transactions of future sales of property because people want to leave because whether they're older or not. And so if we could be as transparent as possible now so that they can have information, would say, if lot one's going to be built, if there's these three locations most likely or something. I mean, if there's any way to give them some lead information beyond this, because fortunately the riparian corridors do offer serious protection, especially for the Stoll family above there. Looks like, at least initially, close to them is not so bad. However, the other lots, depending where they're located, the house will have a major effect. But in any event, I was just curious about that. I don't think the county has any, you won't demand that, but.
And I could just ask for, so initially, the first question was about trees, but have we morphed into?
No, but they work together. We're assuming that there's some transparency that could possibly come our way by virtue of knowing what trees could possibly be removed. That would tell us where a house would be. So if someone's done that thought process already.
I understand. I think it's really hard. This is a map.
It is hard.
At this point, and I think we looked this week in anticipation of these questions. The MBAR and the architectural guidelines are very robust. There is a lot of things that they need to take into account when they review projects. And we feel really confident that when these any future proposal that's gonna come in here,
Mhm.
that MBAR is going to look at that issue. It's front and center with what they're.
I hear
Right,
that. It just,
that's like
we're
after the
frozen
first-
now, though. We're
Yes,
basically,
yep.
the real estate transactions in this surrounding area will be somewhat, unless someone's just has blind faith in the county. But someone's not gonna spend $5 to $10 million on a lot. And, it's important. But I guess we're caught in between here. We really can't make that call. But I just would ask the applicant to be as transparent with your neighbors as possible. If whatever information you have, once we get past this stage.
Sure. What about conditions of approval that we're allowed to make?
Okay, well, that's up, Brian, that's up to you to let us know, or Jeff.
So the conditions that staff has put forward are appropriate for what is being proposed at this time. So we don't recommend adding any further
Appropriate
conditions.
in terms of,
So the proposal is a track map, lines on a map. So the conditions that are proposed are appropriate for the request by the applicants today. What we're talking about now is speculation on future development that isn't before the commission at this time. So any conditions or anything that is in regards to a future development is not appropriate at this time. And so as Mr. Seward's indicated, the guidelines, the policies, and the ordinance already puts in place a system to address the concerns that you're having, which is future development. So future development comes in if the neighbors have concerns or issues, they have a right to appeal. That would be back to before you on an appeal. But before it goes to appeal, we know there's several visits to BAR that they get to go through that addresses these issues that you're talking about. So we're kind of jumping the gun and getting too far into speculation. So what we're asking is you need to pull back and just look at the project.
people after us, I don't think have the same ability to restrict things. They have, like, if we wanted to propose that everything has to be single level that's built on, but I'm just saying that's, I'm just
So Chair and
curious like what we
Commissioner
could
Stahl,
do.
what you can do is set out in the staff report and there's ordinances and guidelines already in place as far as the rights that are available for future development. So we can't go beyond that. And so what we're saying is there's specific findings you need to make today for just a track map.
I would just ask this much. If we know that the potential of removal of mature oak trees are X number, and if we had a sort of a unrecorded but yet dotted map area of then how that increases the potential for a building site. We just knew that with no strings attached to it.
I
Chair
believe
Pelletier, I
that
think-
figure is in the
Yeah.
I think the
slideshow.
building envelope, I think you should assume
Yeah.
that the building envelope, and it's the dark lines, right?
Yeah.
It's the black with the white
So-
dots.
In creating a building envelope on a proposed lot, we are basically telling people you can develop anywhere in that building envelope. We
Okay.
have blocked out all resources or
I just-
hazards, so.
I just think a neighbor would have a key to knowing what that might be, so he could tell his, real estate agent, these trees are subject to being removed, and so this is a likely location for a house that will be 26 feet high, and, can't put story poles up now, but we know what that's gonna affect this lot. And so it may help someone sell a lot because they can at least give more information or sell a house that's worth $30 million or something. It's kind of important that we don't slow up the potential for those kind of transactions with information that's rarely apparent or available. But that's all I'm saying.
In terms of the mitigation, do all the oaks that you're mitigating the removal of the large ones, do those all have to be replanted on the site itself?
We'll go ahead and take that. So they do need to be planted on site. If it's something that's generally what we strive for is whenever you're mitigating for oaks that have been removed, you want to do it on the site that it was removed from. And as you'll see on the site plan, that the green dots are representing where they would be replanted, and that generally follows the ephemeral drainage as well as the oak creep riparian habitat. So that's actually kind of more like a restoration type of approach, and it's not from your client's perspective or the neighbor's perspective, you'll probably see that would have less impact on views going forward because it's already following a natural area where there's vegetation that will be protected.
Understand, I see on what I'm looking at is most of those houses are above that, like anyway, on the western side.
Yeah.
So anyway, I've said what I want to say. Donna, do you have any final comments on this?
Well, I don't know, final, I haven't started. So
Initial comments. You have the floor.
Let me just get into this. So, concentrating on what is before us. Okay. I'd like to kind of go through, which I have with Mr. Fort, some of in my walkthrough, some of my concerns. And I think they would be appropriate to insert as far as a condition in the restoration area and biological and the reports we've seen and the MMD. I'm trying to be as specific as I can and not go into an area that is not within our purview. So regarding weed mitigation, which is termed in the general sort of cleanup, I'd like to propose no Roundup, no glyphosate. I would hope that would be considered seriously. This commission in the past has conditioned various landscape and weed removal predicated on that. So I would hope that would be entertained and followed through with. The other is our dear red-legged frog, which was referenced and is a imperiled ranking, which is in California significant, and the county. And it was referenced as in the drainage, I think, and in the oak, as there have been sightings or the environment is suitable for, but sightings have been more westerly or et cetera. And I'm just wondering, as in cultural resources, say if there's archaeological findings that come up in construction, what happens if our red-legged frog is, shall we say, spotted? What happens on the other side of the equation? We know cultural resources, stop work, et cetera, but what do we do with this imperiled species ranking critter? I think it's of import. I just don't know where you would condition if one is spotted, because they migrate, right? So, and they might, Jessica, you would know all this, right? Jennifer, I'm sorry. Jessica,
Yeah.
the J, okay, I thought I had it right to begin with. And maybe you can address that, but I think it's of import. And just, what's available as far as tools, conditions, et cetera, if there is a heads up that in fact they've been spotted.
Of course, Mr. Chair and Commissioners.
Yes.
So I apologize for not introducing myself earlier. I'm with Store Environmental Services, as you know. So what most of the creeks, if not all of the creeks, when they have water in them in Montecito, are suitable habitat for red-legged frog. Red-legged frog has been documented in Montecito Creek and Hot Springs, there in Arroyo Paradon recently. And so there are channels in Montecito and Carpenter that are suitable. And theoretically, if there's water, like you said, they can move around a distance of up to a couple of miles. So how we deal with that is that you do environmental trainings for construction personnel, and then you have a biologist on site to monitor. And if you do find a red-legged frog, work stops. and you immediately contact, and this happened to me recently in Paradox Creek, you immediately contact US Fish and Wildlife Service, Department of Fish and Wildlife, and you can't move the frog, you can't do
Right,
anything.
right.
So work would stop immediately and the agencies would be notified. And so the process really involves having biologists present during construction in areas where it's a possibility that they could be present. So pre-construction surveys and these other measures that help prevent that kind of thing, injury or harm to an endangered species. And that's what the other agencies require as well.
Okay, so I understand as far as the demo here, by going forward to proposed development and does that follow also with each development as it occurs?
Generally, yes, and that comes along with the environmental review of the construction of the residence. But particularly in Montecito, when that process gets permitted, it also is conditioned with pre-construction surveys and biological monitors and such. So that same kind of oversight would happen for each lot in addition to what's happening with the driveway.
So a potential buyer of a parcel would understand that the California red-legged frog could be present, has been present, et cetera, and it's incumbent upon them, correct?
They would be conditioned to have biologists around.
Yeah. Commissioner Center through the chair, so the project is conditioned, the parcel map is conditioned, those mitigation measures will carry over to each subsequent. So the exact conditions that are on this parcel map will occur on the land use permits that will allow construction. It is mirrored.
Okay.
Correct.
Okay.
Condition 10 is a pre-construction wildlife
Thank you.
survey.
Okay.
So isn't the relocation of trees, rather not relocation, but the replanting of oak trees is really the main. I mean, they're the only anything that's within 50 feet of the creek are those tree planting. So we're not building anything near the creek, so it's really not an issue.
Future, we are removing some stuff out of there, but we're not proposing to build anything.
So that's a good reason why we don't want Roundup being sprayed.
Yeah, so, okay, I can speak to a couple of the questions that have come up. As far as the location of the trees, particularly on the southwest side of the property, those trees will be planted in front. There's a large grove of eucalyptus along the southern portion, or actually the whole stretch of Oak Creek, that are much taller than an oak tree would ever be. So as far as views, particularly on the southwest corner, those oaks aren't going to impede a view that's already blocked by eucalyptus trees. So the eucalyptus trees that are already there are always going to be taller than any mature oak tree. And then when you look at how the building envelopes are designed, so the really large oaks have been avoided by the building envelopes for the most part. The ones in the center are much smaller trees. They're, at most probably this big around. They're not, a mature tree is 6 inches. But some of those oaks are really big, and there's been an effort to preserve all the really large oaks on each parcel. So
Like
when
right here, when you
yeah,
carve around
right,
it like this.
right.
So they purposely carved around those big guys so that they would stay. And then right above where Travis was pointing, where it says R2, there's a cluster of small oaks. I think it's 3 or 4 right there, but they're relatively small trees compared to what's being preserved on the lots. So as far as the view questions, I think particularly in the southwest side, I don't think that's going to be an issue. And along the drainage, they're spaced out around other large oaks and willows that are along that drainage. So I don't think they would, there's a view shed there that I don't think there's going to be any blockage of views from the homes up above, because they'll be roughly the same height as all the other trees that are there. A mature oaks that are like along the east side of that center drainage. I wouldn't imagine any of the planted trees would ever reach a greater height than the trees that are already on site. So as far as like the trees blocking a view, I don't think that would be an issue for those other.
But that's their site, not their location.
So these locations were put there roughly to show that at 20-foot spacing, you can fit 33 oaks in those sites, because you should plant these oak trees relatively far apart, like kind of far apart, because they get pretty big. So you don't want a cluster too close together, which could also cause view problems. So this isn't set in stone. Those spots can be adjusted with along the drainages in the southern portion of Oak Creek, but there's room for the 33 trees.
But then how does the, like when you, like now, if you have, you know, somebody wants to do additional building on an existing site that they have house or whatever, they're required to stay away from the drip line of the oaks. So how will like the architectural board be considering where a house goes from, you know, the drip line of a 15-gallon tree, you know, compared to like what they would be required from a large tree?
So all of the replanted trees that start as 15-gallon will be within a protected restoration area that will never be encroached upon by development, because it'll be within the ESH buffer. And so we can pull away from that edge of the building envelope with the tree placement, but it'll be protected in perpetuity, all of that green area. So anywhere where trees are planted wouldn't be accessible for development.
It just looks like the ones on the east side of that planted area are fairly close to your building setback. So
Those are not set in stone.
I know.
It's kind of an exercise to say, hey, there's room for X number here.
But you have more questions, I'm sure, don't you?
So when will the mitigated oaks be planted?
As part of, so once the improvements to the driveway go in, with those improvements, they would also be required to get a stream bed alteration agreement for the crossing of that drainage.
Yes.
So those agencies would be involved as well as California Department of Fish and Wildlife and the Regional Water Quality Control Board to permit the entrance. And then the restoration would happen following the development of the driveway and the turnaround. And that would also be, that restoration would have to be approved and by not only yourselves, but also those other agencies.
Well, but you also have to have Montecito Water District's line come up as well as an infrastructure improvement. So you'll have water to that area.
Correct. There'll be water lines brought in. So all the utilities and the driveway and the turnaround. So once those impacts are complete, then we would implement the restoration, because you wouldn't want to do it before that.
Right. So this to get this far and to where we agree to this track map, all we know that you're telling us so far is you're going to demo before you get your official map. But are you going to potentially put this infrastructure in so you can start the new trees being planted, or what is there a time frame for that, or can you tell us that, or?
I'm trying to look and see what the timing was for implementation of the plan. I know we have to do a performance security.
So, Mr. Chair, for, I think, the first part of your question, so the demolition of the structures has to be done prior to recordation of the map. As Mr. Ford explained, there'll be new lot lines that would present an issue if there were structures that were existing when the map was recorded. But the construction of the new driveway could not be done until after the map was recorded.
Yes.
And so they need an entitlement. This entitlement needs to be recorded in order for them to
So
construct.
it kind of answers Donna's question that we won't be seeing trees planted for a while.
The trees could be planted without the permit, I guess, but according to the permit, it would not be required until the map is recorded.
Adequate water would be pretty difficult.
They don't need a ton of.
I can't plant.
What is the maintenance of newly planted 15-gallon oaks as far as irrigation, et cetera? And I'm sure it's in the report. I just didn't see it? Is it 3 years? Is it?
It's generally
one-
5 years for
It is 5
native
years.
restoration, both, so you would install and you would preferably install in the fall. When you have rain coming, and then if irrigation, if we can put in drip lines, that's what I would generally prefer, but if that utility isn't available, you can hand water. And then the trees, there is some growth measures that your success criteria.
Correct.
So, you know, a certain amount of height per year that you're trying to achieve. And then over a period of 5 years, I think generally it's required that they get to at least 6 feet tall over that period of time. If you're installing 15 gallon, that's from a 1 gallon oak. If you're installing 15 gallon oaks, sometimes they're 6 feet tall already. But you just want to make sure that they're surviving, they're healthy. So you monitor, there would be monitoring for 5 years.
Okay, and would the applicant monitor these for 5 years? Where does that get transferred to as the parcels are sold?
We're required to put up a performance security that includes a maintenance component
Okay.
to it that lasts 5 years. And as far as I believe Mr. Graham will be coming out there at the end of 5 years. And if he will be the one who decides if that security gets released or not, based on the performance and the condition of the trees.
So,
Oh,
okay.
sorry, this restoration is not, the future lot owners aren't responsible for this restoration. This restoration would be completed without their involvement.
Okay, but it will go, the lots will probably be sold before 5 years, correct? So the maintenance will be it was incumbent upon whom for the maintenance over 5 years?
I can go ahead and jump in here again.
Sure.
So, Mr. Chair and Commissioners, this happens pretty often with development tracks like this, where you split the lot and then over time, lots are sold. And at the county, what we do is we collect the bonds from the applicant at the time. And so there might be in between the maintenance period selling of the lots, and we already have the bond in place. And so whoever ends up transferring that bond, the ownership of that bond over, it really doesn't matter to the county because we've already received it from whoever the party was that was the applicant at the time. So when it's released, if we just have to work with the applicant team to determine who to release it to. So it's already held by the county.
Okay, so water resources, say a drip line, will be established by the applicant to begin with, okay? And so it's charged to the applicant, there's 1 meter, or are there, where is the metering for all this mitigation?
It would be the existing meter. There
There's
is one
one existing meter, okay, and 1 water well.
Oh, private wells.
Okay, excuse me?
2 wells.
There's 2 wells, okay, and would those be used for this? Okay, so probably,
I think they could. We haven't necessarily thought that through yet.
Okay.
That gives them an option though.
Okay.
If they were,
There's a couple options for
Quality
water
wise.
access.
okay.
Do we have a water quality report on those wells by
We
any
don't.
chance?
It's, if I may,
course,
Scott
of
Whitman,
course.
it's the Wilkinson Water Company, a private water company. It's not distillable water, but you can use it for irrigation. And it runs along the Oak Creek. The
Okay.
easement that was granted to this water company runs along Oak Creek. And under the agreement, we have rights to 3 gallons a minute. It can only be used for irrigation.
Okay,
Irrigation would be temporary for restoration. You don't want to irrigate oaks for a long period of time, a couple years at the most. So that would be temporary once they were installed.
so as far as the development of parcels, the 2 water wells, will they be located, or are they located on a particular parcel, and will those groundwater rights be then assigned to the new parcel owner, or is this going to be like an HOA and so it's shared?
Yeah, that hasn't really been, like, if you want to know where the wells are located, I can walk up there if that's
Sure.
helpful.
Sure,
Yeah,
I'd be
I have
interested.
a question though, when you got a willing cancer letter, you did not transfer those rights to Montecito Water Company?
I think it's,
Okay, all right. Just curious.
Something
Wasn't
to,
done since the seventies.
Well, they've asked. They did it in Pittsburgh.
there's a well here.
That was, okay,
Which we wanted as, I mean, it might be helpful for those trees and perhaps that area. And the other well is below the tennis court. Here we go. It's right about here.
okay. Thank you.
Is that the source of water for your family?
No, we have Montecito Water District servicing. We use it just for irrigation.
Got it.
Okay. I will continue with some questions. Thank you so far. So as far as being in the FEMA advisory flood mapping, could someone kind of go into that right now? I know everything's in flux, another 8 months, we might know more, et cetera. But right now, it's for construction, it's 2 feet above BFE. Is that correct?
It's above the advisory flood elevation for now. Once new maps are recorded or set, then that would be a BFE and it would be 2 feet above the BFE.
Okay.
Whatever that ends up being.
Okay. So the zoning right now, as far as flood in this whole area is what?
The zone, it is within the flood recovery mapping area.
The advisory.
Right, the advisory, that's what I have. Okay.
Which doesn't, actually, there are some areas of lot 3 on the left that actually aren't, so it doesn't cover the entire
Okay.
site.
Okay.
And we do anticipate, flood control has the data, it's not released. But we're generally anticipating that it's gonna get better or even go away on this property.
Well, would surely restrict the ability to have a very high ceiling in the second story, otherwise you're in trouble.
The height of future residents is measured from existing grade,
Right.
so you're pretty limited there.
A couple more questions. Regarding truck trips, which was 300 to 600 in this stage of, demo. And that's just per what? Per the whole demo? 3 to 600 truck trips per what? The whole course of the demo? Or is it per week, or is it per day, or is it per what?
I believe that was estimated by the M&D consultant, based on the size of the house, the size of the accessory structure. It's all the
The
demo, all the
totality
demo,
of the
yes.
demo would be between fallouts of debris, et cetera,
Yep.
of 300 to 600 trucks a day. And that is in traffic circulation and monitoring and et cetera, et cetera. Where it's disposed of depends on.
TBD, whether it's
Concrete or whatever.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay. And the other is, as far as dust control, it'd be helpful to have non-potable water. If we could have recycled water. I prefer not to use groundwater. They still have, the aquifer has still not recovered. But if possible, I know we've asked them in the past, if possible and available. I know APCD usually has that in their standard conditions but I would just like to make an asterisk to that. Question, the MGMO, is that still applicable here, the growth ordinance because I, as I recall in the rezoning, whatever, there was a strike through that it was going to be immediately extinguished in general. And I don't know if that's true. I don't know if it's happened, but is it applicable here? Is there a credit? What do you a credit to?
No, it's not applicable for this.
It is not.
project area. It is not.
And that is because?
Working with the state on the housing element, we got feedback I'm really speaking off the top of my head here a little bit. We got feedback that the ordinance,
Alex,
Cannot be applied in the urban area.
yeah, it can't be applied in the urban area.
it cannot.
It cannot, yeah. So,
That's what I recall.
yeah,
But there was a reference to MGMO and the credits somewhere in the documents we've seen. And it was addressed and referenced, but I thought it was specific to, in fact, yes, it did apply. So there was a conflict there from what I read in the past, at least proposed. I don't know if in fact, okay.
When we
Steve?
first applied,
Yes.
we thought it was going to apply. And we were prepared to work through the
Right.
MGMO process, but state law has changed in the meantime.
Okay, so I am
It
correct.
doesn't apply now.
Okay,
Yeah.
so that is done with, extinguished. It is no,
there may be some areas of the Montecito community, maybe we're trying to map that out. But this one, we pulled it out because it just didn't apply.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay, well, that's good for future,
Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
Reference that in fact it does not apply
Yeah.
any longer.
we're working on, trying to get a map together or something.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
So you can come back for the other questions, but well, it's still fresh in my mind, so I don't forget it. Being an old freeway builder, I look at this demo and I just driving to meet you there. There's just putting in those transmission poles, whatever they were, telephone poles. I mean, this is a very tight private street that it's not private, it's public, but it appears to be private. So was there a demolition plan put forth?
We're conditioned to give them a transportation management plan. That'll
Because that's
have a
gonna,
haul route.
that's gonna really introduce you to the community.
We will have to designate a haul route.
Yeah, because
And
there's
traffic control. is
there's no good
necessary.
route. I mean, you come down to the heart of Upper Village or you go up to the mountains, you're kind of like the Nets, you could have used a helicopter here to remove your stuff. But anyway, I guess that's something somebody else will deal with later. Go ahead.
I'm just curious, when the drainage is going to be addressed? Because there's properties below, and especially that easement below. If we have a big rainstorm or something, and that gets too much mud or different things that have happened in the past, it would make sense to me that the drainage is addressed immediately.
Yep. For the installation of the shared driveway, there is a drainage plan associated with that. That'll have a
And for the
basin.
demolition, because I mean, if you're if it's in a state of being demolished and then we get a big rain
Right.
and
For the-
everything.
The
it's-
areas to be demoed.
Well, fortunately, the area, the demo is really located on the north section.
We'll have to
Right.
take care of erosion and sediment control, give them an erosion sediment control plan. Possibly even like reseed those areas and make sure that, we're not just leaving exposed dirt where that driveway and that house were. And then
Just
again,
more along the southern border,
There's
that,
nothing down
runs
there.
along the easement.
But
there won't be any
disturbance.
activity in that area until someone proposes a house. And when they do, they will have to go through, a stormwater plan, get that approved by Project Clean Water at the county. And they'll have to manage their drainage with specific to the house and the site that they propose in the future.
But I mean, I was on that easement after the debris flow. And a lot of stuff was in that creek, and I'm just saying that, I think the drainage should be prioritized in terms of how it could affect the people along that easement and even the people below them to just have egress and
Yeah,
egress.
anything that's proposed, including that driveway, gets reviewed by flood control and has to be, controlled on site. Flood control and the building department as well, in planning in terms of erosion and sediment control.
Unless you plant trees, you're not gonna mess around with this riparian rights anyway. So it's gonna be like it
Not
was
touching the creek, no.
at the, 5 years ago.
Right.
So they don't have that much added responsibility till they upset the soil, and they don't have any plans to it until you get permits. But anyway, you had something you were gonna
There
say?
would be working time restrictions too around rainy season,
Mm.
particularly
Nesting
nesting
birds.
birds, all of those things would apply.
Little red guys.
Yes.
All right, guys, and also when they go to put in the driveway and do the grading there that's shown in the black hash marks, the permits that are required from the Department of Fish and Wildlife and the Regional Water Quality Control Board will follow the person who applied for them. So that 5-year monitoring and maintenance period for those permits will follow the applicant, which would be the group. So regardless of the changeover in the property and the county's jurisdiction, the applicant would still be responsible for fulfilling their permit requirements, which would basically mirror the county requirements. Sometimes they're a little bit more stringent, actually.
Question for you, Joe. I mean, there's this kind of a 3-phase situation here. We get this plat approved and they do the demo. And at some point between that and the house is built, there's an infrastructure package that will come to you that will, and put those improvements, whether it's the water lines for the water district and utilities, whatever, that goes on. And then can someone buy the lot before that? I guess they can, maybe. Is that, you can sell a lot once the track's been approved? Is that?
Once it's recorded, it has to be an actual legal lot. Until it's recorded, it's not a final map.
Yeah.
And so it's not a real parcel, separate individual parcel until you record it.
Okay,
Once
so-
it's recorded, it's a legal lot and you can sell it.
Okay, you can sell it, but you probably can't do anything until the infrastructure package has been in place. Is that correct? Or
How do you mean anything?
No.
well, I mean, decide to get architectural plans going and present to MBAR. Could this be going on jointly?
It could be going on jointly. Well, yes, it could be going on jointly. If you had a separate property owner that wanted to start developing plans, they can do that. Because it's not a recorded lot and they don't have a new APN, I don't think they could open up a new application under that APN for each individual lot until it is recorded.
Well, I just think that once you build infrastructure and you start building houses, there's gonna be an impact on that infrastructure. And so it's a question of how far do you develop that infrastructure and let trucks drive in and build homes and whatever. I mean, this is unusual and it's nice for the neighbors that there's just one main way in. But in order to preserve it, do you have a choice when you allow this to be built? I guess that's what I'm getting to. So
When you allow the actual construction allowed by the track map.
developer, yes.
Once the map is recorded, that they're going to be able to construct, pull permits and construct.
All right.
Is that the plan to sell the individual lots or do you plan to develop them yourselves?
Well, the family company has developed other parcels in the greater. It was 30 acres at one point. We're keeping all of our options open, receptive to.
Because the impact of the current owners developed would just be that the construction would be sort of at one time, hopefully. And it wouldn't extend for 20 years as, people buying the lots and choosing when to build. So I mean, to me, that would be an easier impact.
Well, okay, Donna, you find any more questions in that deep well of knowledge you?
What's the difference between a building envelope and a development envelope, or are they the same?
Great question. It is a great question. We can go ahead and take that. So, Commissioner Stahl, through the chair, a building, it depends on how it's defined. And a building envelope is generally looked at as an envelope where buildings can go, where actual buildings go. Whereas a development envelope is that's where construction can occur. And typically it can't occur outside of it. But that's up to how we define that envelope in the environmental document that's produced. So in this case, the development envelope is generally where all the development can go. And then, of course, there are areas outside of the development envelopes where there is gonna be development that occurs, but it's approved as part of the map. So the access road, the turnaround, the stub outs for the utilities, all of that's gonna occur generally outside of the development envelopes, but it's approved as part of the map.
So in this parcels, they're mostly all 3 acre parcels. There is an FAR or, let me get that right, that the area that they could, the quantity of area, so we're somewhat limited as far as how big a house can be at this point, or building can be. And they're pretty much gonna be like, if they have choices to get to a certain max, but they could build something less if they choose.
And then how do ADUs come into that, just in terms of your development?
Okay, so Commissioner Saul and Mr. Chair, so we'll start with the first question from the chair. So that the floor area ratio is established by the MLUDC. And it is based on the amount of acreage that a parcel has. And so you calculate out the number of net square feet that a structure could have up to 100%. And the BAR, when each application is reviewed by the Montecito Board of Architectural Review, they are given the ability as the review authority to determine whether or not that is appropriate to the parcel. So it is not a hard threshold at 100%. If you get 100% of your floor area ratio, that's great if they approve it. You can go up to 120% if they approve it. But it's the Board of Architectural Review looks at the Montecito community plans, the design guidelines that's part of the comprehensive plan to ensure that it's developed consistently with those policies, which do protect public views and also take into account private views as well. And then, so the other question was for ADUs.
Right.
State law does kind of supersede different requirements within the county. So it's kind of a complex question. There are a number of different categories of ADUs that could be developed, and depending on the size of the ADU, whether it's within an existing structure or not, it could be located outside of a development envelope. But it's each lot in general is afforded the ability to construct, I think it's at least one 800 square foot ADU. So if they come in after they develop each of these lots and they propose a new ADU, we would have to likely approve one 800 square foot ADU per lot, as long as there are no health and safety related impacts to that structure.
Right. You guys have the ability to restrict that location if it impacts ASHA, even if it's 800 square feet?
That is another great question, and I believe.
I think so.
I would have to look at with the code.
If we have ability to use some restrictions, we have to yield is how we look at it. If they don't have any other place to put it, but that is not gonna happen on these properties, so we would make people go outside of habitat areas and stuff.
Okay. What about the like duplex ones? I'm still not clear on a lot of the restrictions on those.
I'm sorry, for duplexes.
Maybe you could ask the next.
Oh, okay.
ADUs are
Right,
elsewhere.
ADUs.
Okay.
Just on point with the ADU, the last is, you cannot have an get an application and build an ADU without the primary residence being also afforded an application and built. So you can't do that first, an ADU. It has to be coordinated and applied for at the same time, and it cannot be occupied until the prime residence has been.
That would be the primary residence. So
Correct.
you can't come in with an ADU and say it's accessory to a.
Right, just for clarifying.
Yep.
Great, thank you.
Okay, any further questions? Or statements?
Public comment?
We can get to that. I'll just say one more thing. Back to that demo permit and the traffic plan. I would say that, Mr. Developer,
Mr. Owner, that is really gonna set a tone for what's gonna happen in the next 3 to 5 years. Because this is really a sensitive little road there, as you well know, you've probably driven it a million times. But I just really would help, the county would be sensitive to the neighborhood. I know you usually are, but it's just, I just see this thing as, that's gonna cause a little wildfire at first. Anyway, that being said, I'm ready to move to the public comments. David, do we have anything?
We don't have anyone online. I haven't received any speaker slips. Is there anyone in the room that'd like to speak on this item?
We appreciate your comments. I'm Jerry Fee
I
and
think
his daughter Katie.
Sir, can you come over here? Because the mic's up.
I think there's one over there too.
Oh, is there a mic up there? Oh, okay. Never mind. Got excited.
You were good, but come on up, you can speak
Here,
anyway.
I saved you a seat, sir.
Thank you.
Tell us who you are.
So I'm Terry Fee and daughter Katie Fee, and we live at 753 San Isidro Road, which is the corner that the trucks are going to be going around. So that's, we appreciate your comments and your thoughtfulness on that, because right now there's construction farther up the street. And we deal with this all the time, so, but, you know, we couldn't afford to buy all the land, so we're gonna have to live with that. So we're willing, you know, it's good that you can at least have hours. I'm sure there'll be certain hours during the day, probably not on the weekend, where the trucks will be coming around. So,
There's a lot of restrictions.
Right,
Yeah.
and there will be posting, I'm sure, to phone numbers where the community can call if they have, you know.
One of our conditions is a notice to the neighbors of when activity's gonna happen.
Okay, great.
Like what's the requirement for which neighbors are notified?
I think it would be 300 feet. For noticing. Noticing the neighbors, is it 300 feet?
From the
It's the
property
standard
line?
from the property line, yeah.
No, if you're gonna have truck haul, you gotta notify where the truck driving lane is. So there's like half a dozen homes on San Isidro that would be noticed as well.
This is for a land use permit? What is it? I'm
We
sorry.
have a
Truck
condition that
removal.
about noticing when we're going to demo.
I'm sure it's in there. I mean, it's not the first rodeo of hauling trash off the Montecito plains. But it's a tight street. That's my
Sure.
point.
Yeah.
Anything over here I'm missing?
Just when you're done with the public speaker, if you could just state his name and address
Yeah.
for the record again.
So yes, say it one more time, please.
Okay, my name is Terry Fee and our address is 753 San Isidro Road.
Okay, well, thank you for coming and showing up,
Thank you.
being present. Okay, anybody else, Mr. Villalobos? Can't tell how I should call you. David.
No, I've not received any additional requests to speak unless anyone changed their mind.
So, just in case the public doesn't know, we don't do story polls at this juncture. But it will come later, I'm sure. You know, in an ideal world, we would know where the house is gonna be built, we'd be able to see it, but we're not living that world right now because it's a long way from when someone's gonna break ground. Okay, so. We wanna put something forward?
Oh, can I just ask a quick question about what you said?
Yes, you may.
The location of actual structures on each lot, does that have to wait until the owner of each lot applies for a building permit, so that in what Ron was speaking about earlier, like none of the neighbors will have any idea what could be built on the house next to them, below them, in front of them, until an applicant actually applies for like the architectural board?
And until they submit for a design review MBAR application and or a land use permit to build the house. They would get noticed.
I think you could, you know, just possibly
if requested, you wouldn't have to, but generate, you know, a map that shows that because we're moving these trees out, the 9, if you get permission to move them out, but you won't know that for how long?
Until someone decides to propose a
Okay,
house.
so we're back to down the road. But okay, I guess you're a good neighbor and I know some of the neighbors know you. So if they really wanted to, you know, walk on their property with a potential
Absolutely.
buyer, you could probably assist them, right?
Full cooperation. I've met with Mr. Stoll, who I believe did do a comment. And if you look at one of those maps, you can see a corridor for his view. I've been on his patio, I can see that. So I want to be, and we have been good neighbors. And that will continue.
Okay, so do we have any, we're not gonna put forth any conditions, I would think, here at this point?
Yes, we're gonna try to get
Okay.
somewhere in the, maybe riparian restoration. I don't know where the weeding and to eliminate
Yes, the roundup.
the Roundup conditioned. Is that where it would go? Where in the conditions would that go?
Mr. Chair and Commissioners, I think if the applicant is willing to consider these additions, perhaps it could be a sentence or two in the project description.
Great,
that would just state what the applicant is choosing to do.
great. Is the applicant amenable
I
to
will
that?
consult with them. I thought that they outlawed Roundup years ago.
No.
For restoration, it is used. There's a lot of restrictions on when it can be used by both the Regional Water Quality Control Board and the California Department of Fish and Wildlife, wind speeds, rain, and things like that. And there's specific types that can be used near water, like Aquamaster, things like that. So, but we can put in the project description, no herbicide use, and then accomplish the restoration doing hand
Yeah, weed
removal.
whacking.
And weed
Yeah.
whacking, yeah, so, yeah, the habitat restoration plan can be structured to accommodate that.
And so there'll be language inserted where in the project description that we don't see now, but it's
We
assumptive.
would like to see it.
You could direct us to add it. We can
Okay.
add it before we approve an issue.
Okay,
Yeah.
that,
Go ahead.
okay, yeah. And as far as the maybe recycled water, I think that does come under APCD as a condition if at all possible. So I don't know if we need language to that.
We can talk to APCD.
Yeah,
on
that'd be
that?
great.
Yeah,
And
okay.
then if groundwater could, shall we say, not be used if at all possible.
So, Mr. Chair and Commissioner, sorry, I know staff is very desirous to move this forward, but it's starting to be a little ambiguous as far as what you're requesting and how it's gonna be implemented. So if we just take a pause, so the project description, we're gonna add a sentence, say no herbicide will be used during restoration. So is it using recycled water where feasible?
Yes.
Under the restoration? So we just need to be very specific because
You could say
when we
if
end,
possible.
then we're
To the
done. So we just wanna
maximum
make
extent
sure
Possible.
we're specific on what we're asking.
Well, those two things I think are fairly specific. If she says if possible. For the,
Okay, so Mr. Chair, to the applicants and staff, that's the project description add-on. So we have two add-ons now. So
okay,
now we're
hold those
moving to
two.
the third one.
Let's see if there's a third one.
Are you looking at me for a third one?
I'm
No,
counting.
we don't have to have a third
No,
one,
we
but,
don't.
No, I don't see a third one.
Okay.
and we just, Chair, if the applicant would just agree that they're okay with those agreeable conditions.
With respect to the groundwater, for instance, the Wilkinson Water Company, where
Yes.
we have the easement for 3 gallons a minute.
Yes.
Would that, I mean, I guess if we have to use the Montecito Water District line, then we're talking about lots of irrigation lines. If we're able to use the Wilkinson water line that we have that, do you consider that to be groundwater?
Where is the source?
I don't know the details of Wilkinson.
So
But I do know
Wilkinson
that
is
most of the
separate from the-
residences have access to that water company and they use it for their irrigation.
but does your well water, do you have a quantity of water you have there that you?
We haven't measured the amount of water that is generated from the 2 wells that we have. We're just, so we've got no recent report and we
Yeah.
don't have a measurement.
What do they use now?
They're used for irrigation. We've got some citrus trees and we've got, avocado trees that we run lines from.
Okay, so in an ideal world, that might be the source of water in the short run till you get permanent public water coming to you for the needs of those oak
Right.
trees.
My understanding is that the Montecito Water District line will go underneath the new driveway that will run.
Yes.
So
That's a year
if we were
old.
to start the mitigation earlier, then it may, we wouldn't be able to use Montecito water for that.
I guess I would, if it could be framed somehow where as far as water resources and irrigation that are used to be the most efficient and protective as possible.
Understood.
If that is language that could be
Can we get that language
Can you repeat that,
spelled
what
out?
you just said?
Yeah, there you go.
regarding irrigation, that regarding water resources for irrigation, that the most protective source be used to irrigate.
That is commercially reasonable.
Correct, commercially reasonable.
I think we have language we're just gonna read to you.
Sure.
Okay.
Okay,
Avion water preferably, but go ahead.
Yeah.
so we'll start with weed abatement. I have the applicant will not utilize Roundup or glyphosate
Yes.
for weed abatement.
Glyphosate.
Glyphosate, okay. And the next one I have is regarding irrigation of restoration areas.
Yes.
The most protective source of water will be used that is commercially reasonable.
I think so.
Sound good?
That sounds good. Thank you.
Thanks.
So this is in a modification revision to the project description.
Description, so it'll be in the conditions. We'll add that before we approve an issue.
So anything you want to volunteer that you want to add to this thing?
I don't have anything in mind. I
That's
appreciate
facetious.
your questioning and,
Yeah. Okay, I think it's time to put up or shut up. So do we have a motion?
I so move with the proposed project description revision that we make the required findings for approval of the project as specified in attachment A to adopt the proposed final mitigation negative declaration as included in attachment C and approve the project subject to conditions included in attachment.
Okay, you want to take official, yes, Brent? Yes, sorry. Jeez. Second, thank you. Okay, officially, David, do you want to take this, call this vote or?
Sure. Commissioner Sanauer,
Yes.
Commissioner Stahl,
Yes.
Chair Police,
Yes.
motion passes 3-0.
Good luck.
Thank you very much. Applications and staff. Applicants and staff.
Good job.
Thank you.
Veronica, you did get your, gotta start as well. I see you went silent later. Thanks, Joe. Everybody else? Travis? So, okay, as far as breaks are concerned, we have a consensus as far as lunch, breakfast, and.
So yeah, Mr. Chair, if we can, it'd be good if we took a break right now, but it is 11:40, staff's here, so the commission can decide. We can go through the next presentation. I think council will be gone at 12. Council will be available via.
We're all good.
Who's presenting?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Oh, of course. Yeah. Nice to meet you.
Can we take a break?
Yeah. Well, we're gonna take a short break. We're gonna come back and pound this out, and we can have a big lunch free without worry.
We're on. I'll put it. She just tells me next slide. Are you guys ready?
Yes,
Okay.
can we start?
Okay, yes, I'm sorry.
You want to
Staring at
introduce
each other.
this? Want to introduce our county planning and development?
Let me read the item on your record. Okay, the following is a hearing on the request of the County of Santa Barbara Planning and Development Department for the Montecito Planning Commission to consider recommending that the County Planning Commission and Board of Supervisors adopt an ordinance to amend Santa Barbara County Code, Montecito Land Use Development Code, chapter 35, and determine the ordinance case number 23 ORD 8 is exempt from the provisions of CEQA. Adopt ordinance case number 23 ORD to amend the Santa Barbara County's coastal zoning ordinance and determine that ordinance case number 23 ORD is exempt from the provisions pursuant sections 15061B3, 15265, and 15282H of the state guidelines for implementation of the California Environmental Quality Act.
Okay, would you like to begin?
Sure. So my name's Alex Tuttle, Division Manager for Long Range Planning, and I have here with me Karina Venegas, who will be providing the presentation.
Mr. Chair and Commissioners, again for the record, my name is Karina Venegas Martin, and today I will be presenting the ADU, SC, rezone, and minor ordinance amendments. Next slide. Earlier this year, the board directed planning and development staff to initiate amendments to the county LUDC, Montecito LUDC, and coastal zoning ordinance to bring the county's ADU ordinances into compliance with recent state legislation. Additionally, staff prepared a set of minor ordinance amendments to correct and clarify existing text provisions that I will discuss further in a later slide. On September 28th of 2022, Assembly Bill 2221 and Senate Bill 897 amended Government Code Section 65852.2 and 65852.22, which are the state regulations pertaining to ADUs and junior ADUs, and also went into effect on January 1st of this year. A couple of changes include an increased height allowance for certain types of ADUs, and it also clarified front setback requirements. As this new legislation became effective, certain provisions of the county's ADU ordinance became inconsistent with state law, and accordingly, staff has drafted amendments to the MLUDC and the coastal zoning ordinance to comply with state law, and has also revised and clarified existing ADU regulations based on learned experiences and to help remove barriers for the construction of ADUs. Next slide. Proposed MLUDC and coastal zoning ordinance amendments are included as attachments C and D to the staff report. The coastal zoning ordinance amendment contains some differences to ensure consistency with the California Coastal Act. And additionally, the coastal zoning ordinance includes the uncertified 2021 amendments, which have been updated to comply with the 2023 legislation. Listed on this slide are some of the proposed amendments, which include an increased height allowance for certain types of ADUs, clarifications on front setbacks and floor area calculation, a 20% total floor area allowance for minor architectural features to be constructed in conjunction with an ADU. And lastly, it eliminated regulations on where an ADU can be located relative to the primary dwelling. Next slide. The next two slides discuss two changes that staff made to comply with state law. New state law allows detached ADUs up to 18 feet if located within 1/2 mile walking distance of a major transit stop or on a lot with an existing or proposed multifamily that is 2 stories high. And also up to 25 feet or the height limit, whichever is lower under the local zoning ordinance, for an ADU that is attached to a primary dwelling. And lastly, for new construction, new state law permits attached and detached ADUs to encroach into the front setback if there is no other alternative to allow the construction of an 800 square foot ADU that meets height limits and complies with the 4-foot side and rear setbacks. Next slide. The proposed ordinance amendments also include minor amendments to the MLEDC and coastal zoning ordinance that solely affect the Montecito community plan area and are subject to the MPC's recommendation to the board, plus other minor amendments that will affect other areas of the county and are subject of the County Planning Commission's recommendation to the board. The following table identifies all of the minor amendments that correct and or clarify existing text provisions. The MLUDC and coastal zoning ordinance both clarify that projects that are determined to be exempt from a planning permit are not subject to appeal, and correct and clarify existing development standards related to detached accessory structures. And lastly, the coastal zoning ordinance includes an amendment that eliminates references to the shopping center SC zone that is not a zone district in the coastal zone and which is being eliminated as part of a broader effort in the inland area outside of Montecito. Next slide. Proposed ordinance amendments to the MLUDC and coastal zoning ordinance are recommended to be determined exempt from environmental review, as they would not result in any new significant impacts or increase the severity of previously considered impacts. As a result, no new environmental document is required pursuant to CEQA guidelines section 15061B3, 15265, and 15282H. Next slide. Staff found a minor typo on section 35.442.015.F.12, tree protection, which is on page 11 of attachment C, exhibit 1. The correction is noted in red font and it corrects and clarifies the intent that trees removed or damaged for the construction of an ADU shall be replaced on site. Next slide. The recommendations for today's ordinance amendments can be found on page 1 through 2 of the staff report dated September 7th. To summarize, they are to make the required findings for approval, including CEQA findings found in attachment A to the staff report, to determine that proposed MLEDC and coastal zoning ordinance amendments are exempt from the provisions of CEQA. And finally, to adopt a resolution and recommend approval of the MLUDC amendments, which are found in attachment C, and make a recommendation to the County Planning Commission that the board adopt the CZO amendments found in attachment D. Next slide. And this concludes staff's presentation, and staff is available for any questions.
Thank you. Good presentation. Should I go to my right first this time?
No,
Tony?
that's fine.
Okay, then I'll go to my left.
Oh, just for clarification, the state laws are already in place and we're just right now out of compliance with state laws, which this would bring us into compliance, is that correct?
Commissioner Stahl, through the chair, yes, that is correct. We are bringing our current ordinance up to compliance with the 2023 legislation.
Okay, and secondly, this will make the coastal and inland zones within Montecito consistent with one another. So we really will only have one set of rules for all of Montecito rather than the way it's kind of hit or miss right now.
If I'm understanding your question correctly, in some sense, yes. But back in 2021, staff submitted an application for a local coastal plan amendment, which included the 2021 ADU amendments, but it did not ever get certified. There were some things that staff needed to respond to, and one of those being a parking study. And other concerns that they had, we needed to provide additional information. So this summer, I believe in July, staff withdrew that original application. So with this ordinance amendment, we are going to be resubmitting those coastal zoning ordinance amendments for this year as a new package. So essentially, because they were uncertified, we're gonna be now resubmitting.
But what you're submitting would
It would replace.
coordinate the inland and the coastal requirements to be consistent? That's
So can I, sorry, or Alex?
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Stahl, there are a couple key differences between the coastal zone and the inland area. Because within the coastal zone, we still have to sort of thread the needle between complying with state law on ADUs, but also the Coastal Act, which has its own set of provisions. So a couple key differences that we will continue to see between the inland and coastal are requirements for replacement parking in certain locations. If you're, for example, converting a garage to an ADU within a portion of the coastal zone, you'd have to provide replacement parking. Whereas in the inland areas, you do not. And then a few other key provisions or differences between coastal and inland with our affect the level of review we have for discretion with regard to protection of coastal resources. So we have a little more authority and control over the placement of ADUs when it comes to things like biological resources, environmentally sensitive habitat, things of that nature that we don't have the authority to regulate in the inland area. So there will still be a couple nuanced differences between coastal and inland, but by and large, the regulations will mirror each other.
But within Montecito, there's both inland areas that are considered inland and coastal. So that you could live across the street from somebody and be under one regulation, and you would be under a different one on the other side of the street.
That's the nature of the coastal zone, yep.
They're their own little piece.
But but at this point, this would help.
Yes, so currently.
Sort of fair to everybody.
Currently, the regulations for ADUs in the coastal zone reflect our original ADU set of standards, which was adopted back in like 2018 or 2019. MLUDC has already gone through one round of update back in 2021. So right now, there are significant differences between the two. This effort will bring them in much closer in alignment.
Thank you.
Okay, did that complete your question? So you might understand that this little box chart that you put forth covers all the comments that are said in the previous page, like clarifying setbacks and clarifying floor area. It's all in this little box that shows the change from the state law to what we have now versus what we're gonna have. That's pretty much in this little chart, so to speak. Table 1 of 5-2, is that?
Chair, you're referring to the MPC staff report.
Yeah.
Okay, yes.
Sorry, I didn't get that word out.
No worries.
But that's it, really, basically what we're talking about here.
Yes, these would be just in reference to the new state law.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, I don't have any questions. Do you?
I do.
Oh,
Okay. Regarding appeals. I see in two different areas it says two different things. And please sort of correct me because maybe I'm just not reading it correctly. So in section 1, in article 2, division 1, C, process. Any determination made by the director that a use, activity, or structure is exempt from the planning permit requirements of this article in accordance with this section is final and not subject to appeal. Okay. A little bit further on in section 33, division 12C, it says appeals regarding accessory dwelling units and junior. The grounds for appeal of an approved or conditionally approved CDP are limited to, and it follows. So kind of thread that needle because it's clear, the language seems to be Okay,
Yep.
so can we clean that up somehow? I mean, what, please inform us.
Mr.
Yes.
Chair, Commissioner Cenower, I don't believe a change is necessary, but let me try to explain. That provision you referenced in section 1, this is an overarching change to the code. So any determination that we did make as a department that an activity is exempt from a permit, meaning no permit requirement, that is
Planning
final,
permit.
no planning permit, that's final and not subject to appeal. ADUs in the coastal zone are not exempt from a planning permit. They require a coastal development permit. So the appeal language particular to coastal zone ADUs would not overlap with this determination that an exempt activity is not appealable.
Okay, so one references an ADU and the other does not? Is that what you're
So
saying?
ADUs in the coastal zone require a coastal development permit.
Correct. Which are appealable.
Which are appealable, subject to the normal terms of
Okay.
appeals.
Okay,
The
And
other
one-
statement is saying that if we determine something to be exempt from a planning permit, for example, 120 square foot shed,
right.
no utilities, currently exempt from a planning permit, we make that determination, that's not an appealable decision.
Okay,
So that, we're talking about two different things.
we are. Okay, thank you.
Yes.
That was my sort of confusion because they seem to, they're referencing totally different.
Referencing totally different sections of the code.
Right, right. So how about noticing in Article 2, ADUs? Are ADUs noticed to the neighbors at all? Is there a noticing requirement or signage, et cetera, versus
Right, so,
the different?
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Cenower, in the coastal zone, because an ADU requires a coastal development permit, it would be subject to the same noticing
Okay.
provisions for any coastal development permit.
Okay,
In the inland area, ADUs are exempt from a planning permit. They only require building permits. So there's no noticing required in the inland area.
okay,
Yeah, our proposed update doesn't address,
Right.
make any changes there.
right, right. There was a reference and in my notes and this, I guess I haven't. Oh, public view. I wonder if that was probably Article 2. There was language that's if public view is significantly is impacted by a proposed ADU, okay? That's a indicator of a review. And the determination is, I just wish I could find the language. It's, I'm trying to figure out who would be who would determine significant impacts to public view. And with public, I mean, who would it be? The director? Would it be, okay, so.
Mr. Chair, Commissioner, yeah, any review of an ADU and its consistency with the development standards would be the director or designee, which
Right,
is
of
staff.
course. And is there, there's no criteria for significant. In other words, the determination of significant is discretionary to who is making the determination. In other words, it's pretty vague. Significant is not, there's no definition of significant. I mean, not personally, I know what significant would be to me, but.
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Cenower, this is another one of those instances where we're threading the needle between meeting ADU state requirements while also complying with the Coastal Act
Right.
requirements.
So it is Article 2, okay.
Coastal Act has a provision essentially protecting significant public views from
Right.
development. And so this is one of those instances where staff would have to look at a project and make that determination, just like they do with any other development in the coastal zone.
And if the determination was made, and since it is subject to appeal in the coastal zone, then a neighbor could weigh in.
Correct.
Okay.
ADUs still have to meet all the height requirements and are limited in size, so I think the likelihood of having an ADU that would trigger that finding would be pretty low, but it's in there just to be consistent with the Coastal Act.
Regarding the must yield protection, could you explain that? What that references exactly? Does it have to do with the location of an ADU in proximity to the principal residence? What is that term referencing?
Commissioner Senhar through the chair. So the must yield provision essentially is to clarify that an attached or detached ADU may encroach into the front setback if there is no other alternative location on the lot or parcel to construct an ADU. That's a minimum of 800 square feet, or up to 800 square feet that meets the height requirements as well as the rear and side setbacks. So what it's saying is that without, conflicting any other applicable standards such as, height, setback, and grading, it must yield to allow for that front setback encroachment. And that's kind of driven by state law.
Yeah, so just to add to that, state law says a jurisdiction cannot place restrictions that would prevent an applicant from developing up to an 800 square foot ADU. And that is inclusive of front setbacks. So we've been, as a jurisdiction, much like many others, very protective of front setbacks. And so we have this language in here to make it clear that front setbacks would still apply. However, if there is no other suitable location, that provision must yield in order to allow that 800 square foot.
In the coastal zone too?
Coastal zone too.
So when, I guess employee housing's, that's got nothing to do with ADUs. I was just thinking about the Miramar and the fact that they did build in the front setback already, because that was approved through the process of this planning commission 4 or 5 years ago. But I guess it's off topic, so I won't go there. I'll get deeper and deeper in the weeds. But I do have one general question for you. That being, this compliance that we're in the process of doing for a lot of different things. I know that about 2.5 years ago, there was also the agricultural farm amendment to housing for farm workers that the state passed, and we're trying to go along with it. But did we have any kind of look and see whether or not we were in similar compliance with the state with our existing plan, or has that already happened, or is there no complaints so we don't do anything about it? Or because that did modify considerably from the state on agricultural housing, at least its accessibility. Has there been any kind of discussion relative like this has been to get more compliant with the state, or do you know?
Mr. Chair, Commissioners, if you're referring to the farm worker housing program,
Yes.
Yeah, we did make various amendments to our codes several years ago in response to changes in state law.
So you did already.
And since then, we haven't identified a need for any further updates. Right. The issue with ADUs is state law keeps changing.
Nice.
So jurisdictions, like every year practically, keep having to change their code in order to keep pace with the changes at the state level.
That makes sense.
It's rather exhausting, to be honest, but it's where we're at.
Well, we're glad you're staying up on things. Go ahead.
Is there a map anywhere available that shows if you look at Montecito, like, does it designate the coastal and inland
Yes,
areas?
there is a map.
It's very jaggedy.
Yeah.
There is a map, but
okay.
Yeah, on our website, we have mapping resources available that delineate that.
Well, any other questions? You have one more? Sure.
I do not.
Come on. There's only three of us. We gotta have questions. All right, well, great report. Terrific presentation. And we're satisfied that David's gonna ask something of us.
You know, when you're ready, I would just.
You have any public comments?
That's what I was gonna.
Ah,
So I was just gonna indicate that we do not have any requests to speak.
you're just trying to show me up. Okay. Any more comments from you guys?
Mr. Chair, if you are gonna be making a motion, just reflect in your motion that the minor revision would be that. Just the little typo that Ms. Venegas identified.
Okay. So,
That was regarding the tree, it was 10-1 or something, that sentence as far as mitigation.
It was really
Oh,
just
there it
one-
is. Okay, well, that makes it easy.
It was just, one little minor
Okay,
correction.
okay. 5, does that say 5-1?
5-1 with 15-gallon.
Interesting. So it's not 3-1, it's 5. Okay.
so, since you did a good job talking about the adoptions before, you want to tell us what we are going to vote on here? Or do you not?
Can you put it back on the slide? The recommendations?
Recommendations for the ordinance.
Yeah, so move,
Station.
you could just make it really fast, move staff's recommendations with the
With this.
revisions
Okay,
as
all right,
discussed.
a motion. Anybody?
I so move to recommend staff's recommendations. And the ADUs before us. And just for clarification, what goes, Article 2 goes to PC and then the board? Otherwise, it's to the board from us.
For the MLUDC.
Right, okay. And so we recommend the case number ending in 08 and ending in 09 with the minor modification of language before us regarding mitigation, et cetera, trees. Right? That works. All right.
Okay,
I'll second.
you want to take a vote there, David?
Commissioner Senauer,
Yes.
Commissioner Stoll,
Yes.
Chair Pliche.
Yes,
Motion passes 3-0.
thank you.
Thank you. Well,
Thank you,
this was
guys.
cozy.
Yeah, I'll be here every week, just keep practicing.
Are we adjourned, right?
Huh?
Are we adjourned?
Oh.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, we are adjourned, thank you.